A hush fell over the auditorium like a curtain dropping on a Broadway stage. Hundreds of spectators, parents, students, judges, sat motionless, barely daring to breathe. The only sounds were the gentle hum of the air conditioning and the slow, steady tick of the oversized clock above the stage. Two boys remained seated at the long row of desks, out of an original 50 contestants. The tension between them crackled like static in the air. In the left chair, Zayn Hartley. 14 years old. Dressed in a crisp navy blazer, his blonde hair perfectly parted, his back straight as a ruler. They called him a prodigy, a math genius. His father, a professor at MIT, was in the front row, eyes sharp, arms folded. Zayn's every movement was smooth, calculated, like he had already solved the problem in front of him 10 minutes ago and was simply giving others time to catch up. In the right chair, Eli Turner. 12 years old. Wore a wrinkled hoodie over khakis, nervously tapping his sneaker against the floor. His brown hair looked like it had been cut at home by someone with kitchen scissors. He clutched his pencil like a lifeline, knuckles pale. To the crowd, he looked out of place, too young, too unsure, too ordinary. But that pencil, it hadn't left his hand since the first round, and it hadn't let him down yet. The final question lit up on the massive digital screen behind them. If a nonlinear function f, x, satisfies f, x, plus f, 1/x, equals x plus 1/x for all x is not equal to 0, what is f, x? A collective intake of breath echoed across the room. The kind of breath you take before a roller coaster drops. Zayn's eyes flicked up to the screen once, then down to his paper. His pencil moved swiftly, confident arcs and strokes that spoke of experience, preparation, and a mind that worked faster than most adults. No wasted motion. Eli, on the other hand, froze. His eyes darted back and forth across the screen. He whispered the problem to himself. He scribbled a few notes. Crossed them out. Drew a diagram. Shook his head. Time was bleeding away. The judges murmured to each other, checking their clipboards. Eli could feel their glances like tiny pinpricks on the back of his neck. A minute passed. Zayn leaned back slightly, placed his pencil down, and folded his hands. Done. He didn't look at Eli. He didn't need to. Eli felt the panic rise in his chest. He could hear his heart in his ears. His fingers felt numb. Somewhere in the crowd, he imagined his mom watching, hands clasped, holding her breath. He imagined Mr. Bennett back in Idaho, probably pacing in front of a grainy live stream. They were counting on him. Or were they? Maybe they were just hoping he wouldn't embarrass himself. Then, something shifted. A voice, his mother's, echoed faintly in his memory. Sometimes courage starts with just showing up. Another voice, Mr. Bennett's, you don't have to be the smartest kid in the room. Just the one who doesn't give up. Eli stared at the problem again. F, x, plus f, 1/x, equals x plus 1/x. He blinked. Then blinked again. What if? What if f, x, was equal to x? He tested it, f, x, equals xf, 1/x, equals 1/xf, x, plus f, 1/x, equals x plus 1/x. It worked. But wait, was that the only solution? He jotted down possibilities, started plugging them in. Something about the symmetry in the equation stood out. His pencil danced faster now, matching the energy that had electrified his thoughts. Zayn glanced sideways, for the first time. Just a flicker. Eli didn't see it, but if he had, he might have smiled. Another minute. Then Eli sat back, eyes wide. He raised his hand. The moderator stood. Eli Turner, do you have an answer? Eli swallowed hard. Yes. The function is f, x, equals x. The crowd leaned forward. The judges looked at each other. One of them, an older woman with silver-rimmed glasses, nodded slightly. "And your reasoning?" she asked gently. Eli cleared his throat. "If f(x) equals x, then f(1/x) equals 1/x. So f(x) plus f(1/x) equals x plus 1/x, which satisfies the condition. I checked for other possible functional forms, but none of them meet the requirement without violating the identity. F(x) equals x is the only function that works consistently." A pause. Then applause erupted. The moderator turned to the panel. All three judges lifted scorecards with the same number, 10. Zayn's fingers twitched, just once. Eli blinked, stunned, as the moderator stepped forward with a small golden trophy. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "our 2025 National Junior Math Champion. Eli Turner from Middleton, Idaho." Flashbulbs popped. Reporters surged forward. Someone whooped in the back of the auditorium. Eli felt like the room was spinning. The trophy was placed in his hands and he almost dropped it from sheer disbelief. He looked out across the crowd, eyes scanning for a familiar face. His mother stood near the back, one hand over her mouth, tears in her eyes, the other waving so high it looked like she was trying to reach him from the stands. Zayn didn't stay for pictures. As soon as the trophy changed hands, he rose, turned, and walked off the stage. His father followed without a word. But Eli stood there, holding that trophy like it was made of lightning. His chest rising and falling with the realization of what had just happened. A boy from a tiny Idaho town. No private tutors. No scholarships. Just an old notebook, a kind teacher, and a mom who never stopped believing. He'd done it. He didn't just belong here. He won. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The cheers still rang in Eli's ears as the hotel elevator doors slid shut. He stood beside his mother, the small golden trophy clutched in both hands like it might disappear if he loosened his grip. They were alone now, away from the cameras, the reporters, the spotlight. Just the two of them in the quiet, humming ascent of an aging Boston elevator. His mom, Claire Turner, let out the breath she'd been holding for the past 3 hours and smiled sideways at him. "I think I just aged 10 years tonight," she joked, nudging him gently with her elbow. Eli grinned, the kind that took over his whole face. "You were crying." "I wasn't crying," she protested. "My eyes were, just sweating from all the tension." Eli laughed softly, finally relaxing into the moment. The smile slowly faded into something gentler, gratitude. He didn't say thank you. He didn't have to. His mom could read it on his face like she'd read every scraped knee, every late-night math doodle, every hard day he never talked about. When they reached their room, Eli placed the trophy on the dresser like it was sacred. The room was small, modest, with a creaky heater and stiff hotel sheets, but to Eli, it might as well have been a penthouse. For a kid from Middleton, Idaho, just being in Boston felt like time travel. Like he'd stepped into someone else's story. But this was his. Later that night, long after his mom fell asleep, still in her sneakers, one arm draped protectively over her purse, Eli lay awake staring at the ceiling. He kept replaying the final question over and over in his mind, like a song he couldn't stop humming. Not just the math part, but everything. The lights. The silence. The moment he raised his hand. Zayn's expression. The trophy in his hand. He should have been exhausted. But adrenaline had other plans. The truth was, he'd never expected to win. Not because he didn't believe in himself, not exactly, but because that kind of thing didn't happen to kids like him. Not in real life. Not in tiny farm towns where math competitions weren't even a line item in the school budget. Not when your mom worked night shifts and clipped coupons to make rent. Not when your dad. Eli turned to his side and stared out the window. The city lights shimmered in the distance like stars had gotten lost and landed on Earth. 4 months earlier, the world looked very different. Middleton, Idaho wasn't the kind of town you found on postcards. It had 2 gas stations, 1 grocery store, a single-screen movie theater, and a whole lot of wind. Cows outnumbered people. The biggest excitement in a normal week was whether the high school football team won or the local diner brought back the Friday night pot roast special. Eli liked it that way. He liked the routine of walking home from school with his hood up and earbuds in, the worn sidewalk under his sneakers, the wind tugging at his backpack straps. He liked stopping by the library, usually empty, to sit by the window and scribble equations into a battered notebook that once belonged to his grandfather. It was an old composition book, the corners curled, the pages yellowed and full of half-solved problems from decades ago. His grandfather, who'd passed before Eli was born, had been a self-taught math enthusiast who never made it to college but loved numbers like most people love music. That notebook was Eli's connection to someone he never got to meet. And math made sense. It always had. While the world could be noisy and unpredictable and full of people who said one thing but meant another, math was solid. Honest. 1 equals 1. If something was true, it stayed true. You didn't have to guess someone's intention or decode a sarcastic tone. Numbers didn't lie. But even in his small comfort zone, Eli had always known he was different. He wasn't popular. He wasn't athletic. And he didn't like the things the other boys liked: hunting, football, Fortnite. He liked prime numbers, probability puzzles, and Fibonacci spirals. He liked silence. Order. Clean lines. Sometimes that meant sitting alone at lunch. Sometimes that meant being called names like Calculator Boy or Eli the Equation Freak. Sometimes it meant not being picked for group projects. He got used to it. He learned how to tune it out. His teachers didn't notice. Or if they did, they assumed Eli was just shy, or gifted, in that way kids were when they weren't quite right socially. But one person saw him clearly, Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bennett had been his math teacher in 6th grade, an older man with a salt and pepper beard and the kind of eyes that always looked like they knew more than they let on. He taught math like it was a treasure map. Like if you just followed the clues long enough, you'd find something magic at the end. He was the first person to ask Eli what kind of math he loved, not just what he was good at. And when he found out that Eli had solved a college-level number theory proof by accident one afternoon, he didn't freak out or call his parents. He just smiled and said, "Interesting. You ever think about competitions?" Eli had shrugged. "What's the point? I'm not, that kind of smart." Mr. Bennett had leaned back in his chair and tapped a pencil against his temple. "Smart is fine. But I'll let you in on a secret: persistence beats brilliance, 9 times out of 10. Eli never forgot that. Weeks passed. Then, out of nowhere, an envelope arrived. Heavy cardstock. Embossed with a gold seal. An invitation to the National Junior Math Invitational. Only 50 students invited nationwide. Eli was one of them. He thought it was a mistake. His mom thought it was spam. But Mr. Bennett? He just nodded and said, "You've got 6 weeks to train. Let's get to work." Now, lying in a Boston hotel room, Eli clutched the trophy to his chest and remembered every second of those 6 weeks. The after-school sessions in the library. The flashcards. The moments when he wanted to give up and the even louder ones when he didn't. He thought about how he used to count ceiling tiles to fall asleep. Then he started counting prime numbers in his head. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. Somewhere between 37 and 43, his breathing slowed. His eyes closed. And for the first time in months, he slept like someone who finally belonged. Zayn Hartley didn't do second place. Not in tests. Not in tournaments. Not in life. At just 14, he had already been featured in the Wall Street Journal, spoken at 2 STEM youth symposiums, and was halfway through a correspondence course in advanced differential equations from MIT. He was the kind of kid other parents whispered about at soccer games. Did you hear what Zayn did now? While their own children stared at him like some kind of legend, half human, half computer. But right now, Zayn Hartley sat alone in the back seat of his father's Tesla, staring out the tinted window at the cold Boston night. He didn't speak. He didn't fidget. He didn't cry. But his right thumb tapped silently against the armrest, 4 beats, then pause. 4 beats. Pause. The same rhythm he'd used to calm himself since he was 6. You lost focus, his father's voice broke the silence. Flat. Controlled. You let emotion interfere. That was your mistake. Zayn didn't answer. He kept tapping. Second place is fine, his mother would have said, gently brushing his hair back from his face. You're still amazing, sweetie. But she wasn't here. She hadn't come. She never came to the competitions. Said they made her too anxious. His father was different. Dr. David Hartley was a professor of theoretical mathematics at MIT and a consultant for the Department of Defense. A man who once corrected a Nobel Prize-winning colleague's equation in the middle of a presentation, and was right. To the world, he was brilliant. To Zayn, he was a wall of expectations wrapped in a necktie. You had the better strategy, Dr. Hartley continued. But you rushed the second round. You ignored the symmetry of the problem. You got arrogant. Zayn clenched his jaw. He had solved problems 10 times harder in half the time. But in that final round, something had felt off. Not just the math. The kid. Eli. That boy wasn't supposed to be there. He didn't fit. Didn't dress the part, act the part. He stuttered through his solution like he was working it out as he spoke, and yet, he'd been right. Zayn couldn't shake the image of Eli's eyes lighting up mid-solution. That flicker of realization. It wasn't rehearsed. It was instinct. And that scared him. Because Zayn had never relied on instinct. His world was made of patterns, data, control. He didn't guess. He knew. But Eli Turner? That kid felt the math. Back at their Beacon Hill townhouse, Zayn climbed the marble staircase to his room without a word. The house was all clean lines and expensive silence, art that no one admired, furniture too uncomfortable to sit in. He preferred his room anyway. It had everything he needed, 3 whiteboards mounted on the wall, a desk with dual monitors, and a bookshelf packed with titles like Pure Logic and its applications and Gödel's theorems for young minds. He dropped his backpack by the door and sat down at the desk, immediately opening the math contest replay file his father had recorded. He fast-forwarded to the final round. There it was. Eli, fidgeting. Nervous. Zayn, calm. Confident. Then something shifted. Zayn slowed the video to half speed and watched Eli's face as he solved the problem. Not the answer. He knew the answer, but the process. The expression. The moment of clarity. Who is this kid? Zayn muttered under his breath. He opened a new browser tab. Typed, Eli Turner, Middleton, Idaho. The search returned almost nothing. No academic records. No local press coverage. Just a blurry yearbook photo and a page from a tiny middle school's website listing him as a 7th grader. No coach, no prep school. No name-brand pedigree. It didn't add up. Unless Eli was the real deal. Zayn leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. He didn't mind competition. He was used to it. But this felt different. Eli hadn't come in with a reputation or a resume. He didn't need to win. He just needed to solve. And somehow, that made him more dangerous. His phone buzzed. A message from his father. Dr. Hartley. Review your second round mistake. I'll quiz you at breakfast. Zayn didn't reply. Instead, he opened a clean whiteboard and started rewriting the problem from the final round. Not to fix it. Not to prove he could have won. But to understand why Eli had seen it faster than he had. There had to be something, some mental pathway Zayn had missed. Something instinctual. Something human. And that bothered him more than losing. The next morning, Zayn entered the kitchen to find his father already seated, reading the Boston Globe. A tablet rested on the table with the contest footage paused at, of course, the moment of Zayn's error. Sit, Dr. Hartley said. Zayn sat. What did you miss? His father asked without looking up. Zayn took a slow breath. I assumed a linear solution without verifying. I didn't test for symmetry before reducing. Dr. Hartley nodded once. And the boy? Zayn hesitated. Eli Turner. From Idaho. Zayn nodded again. What's your assessment? Zayn considered. Raw. Untrained. But good. Possibly very good. Better than you? It wasn't a real question. It was a challenge. No, Zayn said, even though a small part of him wasn't so sure. Then act like it, his father said, folding his paper. I've enrolled you in the American Math Decathlon this summer. Regionals begin in June. That gives you 4 months. You'll win it. Zayn nodded. He didn't ask if he wanted to do the decathlon. He never did. He finished breakfast in silence, but his mind was already turning. Not about the decathlon. Not about his mistake. But about Eli. He needed to know more. How did someone like that, small town, no prep, no reputation, end up at a national final and win? More importantly, would he be back? That night, Zayn opened the notebook where he kept track of every major competitor he'd faced in the last 3 years. Dates, scores, weaknesses, patterns. Eli Turner now had a page. He titled it. Turner, ELI, The Wild Variable. Beneath that, he wrote. Smart doesn't scare me. Talent doesn't scare me. But unpredictability? That's a problem worth solving. The welcome banner looked like it had been made in a rush, with red paint streaked across a wrinkled bedsheet and the word champion spelled with a backwards N. But to Eli, it might as well have been the Sistine Chapel. It was taped above the entrance to Middleton Middle School, swaying in the breeze like a flag announcing his return. He didn't expect it. He hadn't expected any of it, certainly not the crowd of kids clustered outside the school steps, or the principal grinning like someone just handed her a state championship. He hadn't expected the applause, or the hand-painted signs, or the middle school band valiantly attempting to play Eye of the Tiger, with 2 clarinets, 1 trombone, and a kid banging a snare like it owed him money. Is this, for me? Eli asked his mom, blinking behind his glasses. Claire Turner squeezed his shoulder. Unless there's another 12-year-old math champ from Middleton I don't know about. He stepped out of the car slowly, clutching his backpack like a shield. A few kids clapped. One yelled his name. Someone held up a phone, recording. It was surreal. For a second, Eli thought he was still dreaming, still in that Boston hotel room where the trophy gleamed under the bedside lamp and everything had felt temporary. But this was home. The cracked sidewalks. The smell of fresh soil. The faint sound of cows in the distance. He wasn't a visitor anymore. He was the Eli Turner now. Inside the school, the celebration continued, teachers shook his hand, the office secretary made him his favorite banana muffin, and someone even decorated his locker with glitter and cutout numbers. But not everyone joined in. As he made his way down the hall, a pair of 8th grade boys leaned against the lockers, smirking. "Hey genius," one said, "solve this, what's 1 plus, nobody cares." The other one snorted. Eli felt his ears burn, but he kept walking. He was used to it. Being good at math had always made him a little strange around here. Too quiet. Too smart. Too different. Only now, he wasn't just smart. He was famous. At least in Middleton terms. That made it worse for some people. In Mr. Bennett's class, however, it was all smiles. The moment Eli stepped through the door, the teacher clapped his hands and announced, "The prodigal problem solver returns." The class chuckled, and even Eli smiled. He took his usual seat by the window, still warm from the morning sun, and pulled out his worn notebook. Mr. Bennett winked. "You ready for the next level, champ?" "I think I am," Eli said, more confident than he'd ever sounded before. But under the desk, his hands still fidgeted. He didn't feel like a champion. Not really. He just got lucky. He saw something Zayn didn't. What if next time he didn't? What if it had been a fluke? The following week, things started to shift. At first, it was little things. Questions from classmates he'd never talked to before, invitations to sit at new lunch tables, requests to help with homework that felt more like, "Do it for me." Then came the local newspaper article. Idaho Whiz Kid Stuns Nation, Defeats MIT Prodigy. It ran in the Middleton Gazette with a grainy photo of Eli holding his trophy, squinting in the Boston sunlight. His name was suddenly everywhere. The school put up a plaque. A state senator sent a letter. A tech company offered to donate new laptops to the school, in Eli Turner's honor. People smiled at him differently now, like he was a lottery ticket. Like he was useful. Even his teachers looked at him with new eyes. Except Mr. Bennett. He didn't change. He still gave Eli the hardest problems, still challenged him to explain why not just how, still reminded him, smart means nothing without heart. But one afternoon, as Eli sat by the window scribbling through a modular arithmetic problem, he noticed something strange. A new email. Subject line, "Zayn Hartley wants to connect." His heart skipped. Zayn. The genius. He clicked it open. "Hey Eli. Congrats on your win. You were impressive. I was wondering if you'd be interested in a little online match, just for fun. Thought we could trade problems, maybe learn from each other. No pressure. Let me know. Zayn." Eli read it twice. Then again. His pulse pounded. He wasn't sure if it was excitement or nerves, or both. Zayn Hartley. The boy he'd beat. Reaching out. Friendly. Curious. Or was it a trap? He stared at the email for a long moment, then typed out a reply. "Hey Zayn. Thanks. I'm open to that. Want to trade problems next week? Eli." He hit send before he could change his mind. That night, at the kitchen table, Eli pushed peas around his plate while his mom scrolled on her phone. "More interviews are asking," she said. "That math podcast, a couple YouTube channels. Oh, and someone named STEM Spotlight wants to feature you next month." Eli shrugged. "Do I have to?" She put the phone down. "No. You don't. But it's okay to be proud of this, Eli. You earned it." He looked up at her. "What if it doesn't happen again? What if I can't solve the next one?" Claire stood and walked to his side, kneeling until she was at eye level. "Then we'll deal with that when it happens. But don't let fear stop you from enjoying right now. This moment is yours, kiddo." He nodded, quietly. Then went back to his room, closed the door, and opened Zayn's profile. There, on the screen, was his new rival. Clean. Polished. Strategic. And for the first time, Eli didn't feel intimidated. He felt challenged. The next day, Zayn sent the first problem. It wasn't easy. It wasn't meant to be. But Eli grinned as he stared it down, pencil tapping on the desk. It was a game now. And the game had just begun. The problem sat on Eli's screen like a dare. Zayn's message had come in that morning, a simple email with a PDF attachment titled Hartley Challenge 01.pdf. The subject line. Let's see what you've got. No emojis. No extra words. Just the problem. Eli clicked the file and leaned in. His heart quickened. Let f, n, be a function that returns the number of ones in the binary representation of n. For example, f, 5, equals 2 since 5 in binary is 101. Find the smallest integer n such that f, 1, plus f, 2, plus f, 3, plus f, n, greater than or equal to 1000. Eli's eyebrows shot up. This wasn't just difficult. It was mean. It was the kind of problem that required clever insight and persistence. The kind that punished brute force and rewarded elegant thought. Zayn wasn't playing around. Eli grinned. He loved this stuff. For the next hour, Eli forgot everything else. The noise of the school day disappeared, the faint drone of math class faded into the background, and even lunch passed unnoticed. He sat in the library, hunched over his notebook, scribbling binary patterns and testing small values. 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. He started spotting rhythms, how each power of 2 introduced a new one into the sum, how sequences repeated with slight variations. His pencil tapped furiously. By the end of fourth period, he had a recursive model sketched out. Nothing fancy, but it let him approximate the running total of binary ones as n increased. He plugged in values. N equals 100. Too small. N equals 200. Closer. N equals 300. Almost there. N equals 319. Bingo. Total sum equals 1003. He double-checked. Then checked again. The answer was n equals 319. He opened his reply draft to Zayn and kept it brief. Answer, 319. Here's why. Let f, n, count the number of ones in n's binary representation. Total equals sigma f, n, from 1 to n. I tracked patterns in powers of 2 and estimated the binary density increase. 319 is the smallest integer where the cumulative sum of f, n, hits or exceeds 1000. Now it's your turn. He hit send. The moment his finger left the mouse, a strange calm settled over him. The calm that came from knowing. This wasn't about who was better. Not yet. It was about learning what kind of game they were really playing. The next day, Zayn responded. Well done. Took me 27 minutes. How long did it take you? Eli stared at the message. No smiley. No clue if that was a compliment or a challenge. He typed back. About an hour. Worth every second. Zayn's reply came instantly. Want to keep going? Eli didn't hesitate. Always. From that day on, it became routine. Every Monday, Zayn would send a new problem. Every Thursday, Eli would return the answer, and a new challenge of his own. They never agreed to this schedule. It just evolved. Like a handshake between two people who never met, but somehow knew exactly how to connect. Their problems grew harder. More abstract. Complex number identities. Combinatorics with conditions. Even the occasional number theory riddle that read like a poem. They rarely talked beyond math. No life updates. No jokes. Just equations. And yet, It felt like a friendship forming in the only language either of them fully trusted. But not everyone saw it that way. One Friday afternoon, Eli sat on the front steps of the school, waiting for his mom to pick him up. He had a notebook open on his lap and was scribbling notes for the next problem he planned to send. That's when Owen Keller, one of the 8th grade boys who'd heckled him before, walked by with 2 friends. "Still playing calculator, boy?" Owen sneered. "What's the prize this time?" "Free trip to Nerdland." Eli ignored him. That usually worked. But Owen didn't walk away. "You think you're better than everyone now, huh? Just 'cause you beat some prep school robot?" Eli looked up, expression calm. "No. I just like solving problems." "That's cute," Owen scoffed. "You know what real problems are? Rent. Jobs. People who don't give a crap about your little number games." Eli closed his notebook carefully and stood up. "I'm not trying to be better than anyone," he said. "I'm just trying to be better than I was yesterday." Owen blinked. For a second, he didn't know what to say. Then he scoffed again, shoved past Eli, and stormed off. That night, Eli sent Zayn his newest problem. This time, it was different. Not just numbers, but words. Imagine a 3x3 grid filled with the digits 1 through 9, 1 in each cell. You can move from any cell to any adjacent one, horizontally, vertically, or diagonally. What's the maximum sum you can make by moving through exactly 5 cells without repeating any? No tricks. No weird rules. Just logic and strategy. Zayn responded later that night. "Oof. You're getting mean. I like it." Eli smiled, lying on his bed, feet dangling off the edge. He imagined Zayn sitting somewhere in a spotless room with sharp pencils and a clock ticking on the wall. Solving his problem. It felt good. For once in his life, he wasn't weird. He wasn't alone. He wasn't the only kid who thought math was art. He was playing with someone who got it. And that changed everything. It started as a side note on a STEM blog. Someone had been watching. Not a parent. Not a teacher. Not someone from Middleton. No, this was a grad student at Carnegie Mellon who followed math competitions like some people followed football. They stumbled across a forum thread about a kid named Zayn Hartley getting bested at the National Junior Math Invitational, and buried in the replies was a passing mention. "He's been trading problems online with the winner. Some kid from Idaho. Turner or something." That was all it took. Within days, the niche math blogosphere was buzzing. Who was Eli Turner? Was he just a lucky underdog or something rarer, a true prodigy hiding in plain sight? People started asking questions. Quietly at first. Then louder. A popular YouTube channel called Proof and Power made a short video. Genius versus Underdog, a new math rivalry. It had 40,000 views in the first 24 hours. Eli had no idea. At least, not until Mr. Bennett waved a printout in front of him during a Tuesday afternoon problem session. "You made YouTube, Eli," he said with a lopsided grin. Eli squinted. "What? Apparently you and Zayn are the hot new math story. Rival brainiacs. Internet drama. Teenage calculus cage match." "That's not real," Eli said, taking the paper. "Oh, it's very real," Bennett replied. "You're a hashtag now." Eli's face flushed. He didn't want that. Not really. He didn't want to be famous. He just wanted to solve. To find the next pattern, the next question. But now, the spotlight was creeping closer. And with it came something new. Pressure. That night, Eli sat in his room, the YouTube video paused on his laptop screen. A commentator with oversized glasses was walking viewers through both boys' latest problem exchange, breaking down their approaches, showing handwritten notes, speculating on strategies like it was chess. Turner's approach here is interesting, the voice said. Instead of brute force, he seems to intuit structure. Pattern over computation. It's the kind of thinking we see in true mathematical intuition, not just textbook regurgitation. Eli shut the lid. It was too much. Across the country, Zayn watched the same video in his room. But he didn't flinch. He rewound. Paused. Analyzed. And then opened a new browser tab, typing. Eli Turner Math Contest Boston Replay. He'd watched the final round dozens of times. But this time, he focused not on Eli's answer, but his face. The hesitation. The pause. The moment he lit up with the idea. It wasn't cocky. It wasn't lucky. It was pure. Zayn leaned back in his chair. A tightness curled in his stomach. Not anger. Not jealousy. Something more complicated. Respect. And maybe something like fear. Because if this kid wasn't a fluke, then Zayn wasn't just up against a rival. He was up against his equal. Maybe even more than that. By Thursday, Eli's inbox was full. Interview requests. Podcasts. Invitations to youth summits. Emails from tech startups wanting him to test their new math platforms. A few were polite. A few were pushy. All of them wanted something. Eli didn't answer any of them. He sat on his bed, staring at the emails, feeling smaller with every new message. He'd always wanted people to take him seriously. But not like this. Not as a symbol. Not as a headline. He needed something to ground him. He opened Zayn's latest problem. A 4-digit number is such that the sum of its digits equals 20. If the number is divisible by 9, how many such numbers exist? Eli exhaled. This was good. Clean. Countable. He cracked his knuckles, grabbed a pencil, and got to work. For 2 hours, he was just Eli again, not a genius, not a story, not a symbol, just a boy with a notebook and a world to figure out. The next morning, he sent his solution. There are 432 valid numbers. Broke it down by digit sums, applied divisibility rules, used a small script to verify. You're getting tougher. I like it. He stared at the blinking cursor. Then, before he could overthink it, he typed. All the noise lately, kinda makes me miss when it was just you and me solving. Zayn's reply came 5 minutes later. Same. They'll forget in a month. Let's give them something they won't. It was the most human thing Zayn had written yet. And for a moment, Eli smiled. But the peace didn't last. Later that week, a new video dropped. This time from a bigger channel, Mathlete Battles, Can Eli Beat Zayn Again? It featured a side-by-side comparison of both boys' lives, Zayn's sleek academic achievements against Eli's small-town underdog charm. Eli watched in silence as they pitted him and Zayn like boxers before a fight. The final line of the video made his stomach drop. They're both headed for the American Math Decathlon. And when they face off again, only one will win. He hadn't signed up for the decathlon. Not yet. But someone had. He found out that night when his mom came into his room holding a letter. From the state organizers, she said, her brow creased. They said your teacher nominated you. You're in the regional qualifiers next month. Eli stared at the paper. His heart pounded. It's optional, she added gently. If it's too much, we'll say no. But Eli didn't answer right away. Because deep down, under the fear, under the pressure, under the noise, was something else. Fire. Not to win. But to prove something. Not to the world. Not even to Zayn. To himself. He took the letter and looked up. I'm in. The email arrived on the second Tuesday of March, the day after Eli's decision. His heart skipped a beat when he saw the subject line, "Congratulations, your spot at the regional decathlon." For a moment, he just stared at it. Then, with a deep breath, he clicked it open. Dear Eli Turner, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as a finalist for the regional math decathlon. You will be representing Middleton Middle School as one of our top contenders. Please confirm your participation by responding to this email before the end of the week. The competition will take place on April 3rd at 9 a.m. at the University Auditorium. Further details will be sent in the following days. We wish you the best of luck in the competition. Sincerely, the Math Decathlon Committee. Eli sat back in his chair, the weight of the words settling on him like an avalanche. The decathlon was real. It wasn't a joke, or a hypothetical, maybe. It was happening. And he was in. The week that followed felt like a blur. His days were consumed with practice problems, formulas, and mental exercises. He was locked in a rhythm now, waking up at 6:00 a.m. to review past competitions, practicing mental math during lunch, and running through test simulations after school. The pressure was mounting, and so was his anxiety. The more he studied, the more he realized how little he actually knew. It wasn't that the material was beyond him, it was just that everyone at the decathlon would be good. Really good. His competitors weren't just some kids from his school, they were the best of the best. The pressure of representing Middleton weighed heavily on him, but what felt even heavier was the sense that Zayn would be there. Zayn, the one boy who had pushed him to this point, who now represented everything that made Eli feel small. Zayn had responded to his message from earlier in the week. Good luck, Turner. May the best mathlete win. That was it. No smirk. No taunts. Just cold respect. Eli couldn't decide if it made him feel better or worse. The morning of the competition came faster than Eli expected. He woke up with the sun, his stomach in knots. He ate a quick breakfast, barely tasting it, then grabbed his bag and slung it over his shoulder. His mom drove him to the university. The campus was quiet, bathed in the early morning light, and everything felt too calm. She didn't say much during the drive, but Eli could feel her nervous energy, her eyes flicking from the road to him every few seconds, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. You okay? She asked after a long silence. Eli nodded, though his hands were clammy. Yeah. Just, nervous. You've got this, she said, her voice steady. You've worked so hard, Eli. Don't forget that. I won't, he muttered, even though doubts were swirling in his mind. How could he forget? Zayn had been working just as hard, if not harder. And the pressure of being the underdog didn't make him feel any better. It just made him feel different. They arrived at the university auditorium just as the sun was fully up. A massive banner hung over the entrance, reading, "Welcome to the 2025 Regional Math Decathlon." Students in school uniforms were trickling in, some talking excitedly with friends, others looking at their notebooks, preparing mentally for what lay ahead. Eli checked in at the registration desk, where a woman with sharp glasses gave him a folder filled with instructions and schedules. You'll be in room 305 for the first round, she said, her voice brisk but polite. Please make sure to be there by 9 a.m. sharp. He nodded, stuffing the papers into his bag. His heart beat faster as he turned away from the desk. Room 305. The nerves were creeping in now, tingling at the back of his neck. He couldn't shake the feeling that today was going to change everything. He didn't know if that was a good or bad thing. It wasn't long before Eli found himself standing in front of room 305, pacing back and forth. His thoughts were a jumbled mess. What if I freeze? What if I fail? What if Zayn beats me? He shook his head. He couldn't afford to think like that. He had to focus. He had to do. When the doors to the room opened, he stepped inside. A long table stretched across the front of the room, and rows of desks were set up for the competitors. Eli scanned the room, noting the few familiar faces. Then his eyes landed on Zayn, sitting near the front. Zayn was focused, scribbling notes in his notebook, his expression unreadable. He didn't look up. Eli sat down at a desk far from him. The other kids were talking in hushed tones, some nervously tapping pencils on the desks, others flipping through their own notes. A few minutes later, a man in a black blazer stepped up to the front of the room. "Good morning, everyone," he said, his voice strong and clear. "I'm Professor Miles, and I'll be overseeing this round of the decathlon. In just a moment, we'll begin with your first challenge. Please make sure to read the instructions carefully before you begin." The hum of quiet chatter died down, and the only sound in the room was the soft rustling of papers. Eli could feel his heartbeat in his chest. The competition was about to begin. "Your first problem is on the board," Professor Miles said, gesturing to a large screen at the front. "You have 30 minutes to solve it. Good luck." The first problem appeared on the screen. It was a problem about prime numbers, a classic, but with a twist. How many prime numbers are there between 100 and 200? Eli's hand shot up, and his mind was already moving. He recognized the pattern. It was a simple problem, but the key was in the exclusions. He jotted down a list of numbers, then started crossing out the non-primes. It took only a few moments, and soon he had the answer. He looked around. Other students were scribbling, some furiously, others in a daze. Eli smiled. This was what he did best: find the pattern, solve the problem, move on. But as the minutes ticked by, his gaze drifted again to Zayn. Zayn wasn't working quickly. His pencil hovered above the paper as he studied the problem carefully, his brow furrowed in concentration. Eli frowned, his confidence slipping. Was Zayn struggling? Or was he just taking his time to make sure the answer was perfect? Eli shook his head. He couldn't worry about that now. He focused back on his own work, pushing the thought of Zayn aside. The decathlon had just begun. The clock on the wall ticked loudly as Eli's pencil flew across the paper. He'd finished the first problem, about prime numbers, within 10 minutes. But now, as the second problem appeared on the screen, something shifted. The tension in the room seemed to grow heavier. Eli took a deep breath, scanning the new problem. A geometric sequence begins with the number 3 and has a common ratio of 2. What is the sum of the first 10 terms of the sequence? Eli knew the formula for the sum of a geometric series. He recited it in his head. Sn equals a 1 minus Rn, 1 minus Rs underscore n equals a backslash frac 1, r to the power of n, 1, r, Sn equals a 1 minus r, 1 minus Rn. Where AAA was the first term, RRR was the common ratio, and NNN was the number of terms. But then, as he began to plug in the numbers, something caught his eye. Zayn was still sitting motionless in his seat. His eyes never left the screen, and his hand had yet to even move toward his paper. Eli shook his head, trying to ignore the growing discomfort in his chest. It felt like Zayn was already a step ahead. The silence in the room became almost suffocating. Eli continued solving the problem, filling in the numbers. 3 times, 1 minus 2 10, 1 minus 2 equals 3 times, 1 minus 10 24, minus 1 backslash frac, 1, 2 caret, 10, 1 to 2, equals 3 backslash times backslash frac, 1 to 1024, dash 1, 1 minus 2, 1 minus 2 10, equals 3 times minus 1, 1 minus 10 24. He clicked his tongue in frustration when he realized the negative sign would flip the equation. With the right answer in mind, he wrote down S10 equals 3 times, 1023, equals 3069 S underscore, 10, equals 3 backslash times, 1023, equals 3069 S10 equals 3 times, 1023, equals 3069. Done. He sat back and glanced at the other students. Everyone else appeared to be still working through the sequence, and the room seemed eerily quiet except for the steady hum of turning pages and the occasional scribble. Zayn's pen moved. The other competitors didn't seem to notice, but Eli did. Zayn had written down something on his paper. Slowly, Zayn lifted his head, meeting Eli's gaze. There was something in the way Zayn looked at him, a quiet confidence, like he knew exactly what Eli was thinking. But Eli quickly looked away. He couldn't afford to get distracted now. His mind raced to the next problem. The problems kept coming, each one more difficult than the last, but Eli powered through them with the same methodical focus. He was on a roll, solving each problem with growing confidence. But then, halfway through the third round, it happened. Eli's eyes scanned the problem on the screen. A rectangular prism has a length of 8, a width of 6, and a height of 4. What is the total surface area of the prism? At first, it seemed simple. The formula for the surface area of a rectangular prism was straightforward. SA equals 2LW plus 2LH plus 2WH. SA equals 2LW plus 2LH plus 2WH. SA equals 2LW plus 2LH plus 2WH. Where LLL, WWW, and HHH were the length, width, and height of the prism, respectively. Eli quickly began to plug in the values. SA equals 2, 8 by 6, plus 2, 8 by 4, plus 2, 6 by 4, SA equals 2, 8 backslash times 6, plus 2, 8 backslash times 4, plus 2, 6 backslash times 4, SA equals 2, 8 by 6, plus 2, 8 by 4, plus 2, 6 by 4, SA equals 2, 48, plus 2, 32, plus 2, 24, SA equals 2, 48, plus 2, 32, plus 2, 24. SA equals 2, 48, plus 2, 32, plus 2, 24, SA equals 96 plus 64 plus 48 equals 208. SA equals 96 plus 64 plus 48 equals 208. SA equals 96 plus 64 plus 48 equals 208. It was a simple problem, but then Eli hesitated. What if there was something more? Something hidden in the phrasing of the problem? He glanced at the others around him. Most of them were busy working, their brows furrowed in concentration. Zayn, though, had already completed the problem. His hand hovered over his answer sheet, a calm and steady look on his face as he paused to reconsider his work. Eli stopped. Was he missing something? He scribbled the formula down again and calculated each term carefully, just to be sure. As his eyes danced back and forth between the formula and his work, a creeping thought rose in his chest. Could there be an additional layer to this? Was the phrasing of the problem deliberately misleading? Eli's pulse quickened. He couldn't afford a mistake. He needed to be sure. He sat there for a moment, unsure of whether to trust his gut or the process. Time was ticking away, and it would be easy to rush the answer. But rushing could be a fatal mistake. Across the room, Zayn was the first to raise his hand. Professor Miles, Zayn said, his voice smooth, his answer sheet already filled with precision. He made eye contact with the proctor and waited for permission. Professor Miles nodded. Go ahead, Zayn. Eli couldn't help but watch as Zayn stood and handed his paper in early. Was he done? Already? Zayn's calmness was almost unnerving. Eli checked the clock. There were only 5 minutes left in the round. Panic hit him like a ton of bricks. He had to finish. He returned to his calculations, double-checking everything. As the seconds ticked away, he could feel the pressure mounting in his chest. His fingers were starting to tremble. He was so focused on getting the right answer that the rest of the room felt like it was slipping away. The final moments were chaos, papers rustling, students scribbling madly, hands twitching. The clock ticked down to the final second, and Eli slammed his pencil down on the desk. Done. Professor Miles collected the papers, and Eli took a slow breath, trying to settle his nerves. He couldn't shake the feeling that something had been off about that problem. Maybe it had been nothing, but that nagging feeling lingered, gnawing at him. Zayn was already sitting back in his chair, relaxed, as though none of this had fazed him. Eli glanced at him once more, no smugness, no arrogance. Just a calm, confident air. "I'll see you at the next round, Turner," Zayn said quietly, as though the competition was already settled. Eli didn't respond. Instead, he focused ahead, steeling himself for what would come next. The tension continued to build throughout the next rounds, each problem harder than the last. But Eli had made a decision: he wouldn't let the pressure break him. He couldn't. Not now. The path to victory would be through his own focus, his own determination. Zayn might have been ahead, but Eli wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. The pressure of the competition had started to press down on Eli like a heavy weight. The morning had been a blur of mental calculations, formulae, and problem-solving, each round more challenging than the last. With each new problem, the distance between him and Zayn seemed to widen. And yet, Eli could feel something deep inside him, a spark of determination that refused to go out. But now, as they approached the final round of the morning session, the stakes were higher than ever. "All right, competitors," Professor Miles called out, his voice booming over the murmurs of the students. "This will be your last round before lunch. The questions will be more difficult. I expect you all to stay sharp." Eli's stomach tightened. He wiped his sweaty palms on his jeans and took a deep breath. The last round. It was make or break, and with Zayn already leading, he couldn't afford to let his guard down. He glanced around the room. Most of the competitors were focused, scribbling down their notes, mentally preparing for what was to come. Zayn, of course, sat at the front, calm as always, his pen resting on the desk. He was in the zone. Eli could tell by the way he moved, graceful and confident. Eli shifted his gaze. What could he possibly do to close the gap? He wasn't as fast as Zayn, and despite all his effort, he had a sinking feeling that he was always just a step behind. The problem for the final round appeared on the screen. A sequence of numbers is defined as follows: the first term is 1, the second term is 1, and each subsequent term is the sum of the previous two terms. What is the 20th term in this sequence? Eli's breath caught in his throat. This was the Fibonacci sequence. He knew it well. The sequence began with 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34. The numbers grew exponentially, each one building on the previous two. He quickly jotted down the first few terms of the sequence in his notebook. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55. He had learned the Fibonacci sequence long ago, but what was he missing? The problem asked for the 20th term. Could he calculate it without making a mistake? Eli could feel his pulse quicken. He began to write out the sequence, focusing intently. The numbers began to blur together as he raced to catch up. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, 89, 144, 233, 377, 610, 987, 1597, 2584, 4181, 6765. Eli breathed a sigh of relief. He had done it. The 20th term in the Fibonacci sequence was 6765. His hands were shaking, but the answer was there. He quickly jotted it down on his answer sheet, and then, something strange happened. His eyes shifted back to Zayn. Zayn hadn't written anything yet. In fact, he was looking at the problem on the screen with a strange intensity. He wasn't writing down the sequence like the others. He wasn't even taking notes. He was staring, deep in thought. Eli's stomach twisted. What was Zayn doing? A nagging doubt settled into Eli's mind. Zayn's calmness was unsettling. He had never seen him act this way before. Was Zayn overthinking it? Was he doing something different? He glanced down at his own sheet. The answer was obvious. There was no trick. No hidden layers to the problem. It was just a simple Fibonacci sequence. So why was Zayn acting like this? Eli began to second-guess himself. What if the problem wasn't as straightforward as he thought? What if there was something about the question that everyone else was missing? What if the Fibonacci sequence was just a ruse, a way to make them think they knew the answer, only to lead them into a trap? No. He couldn't think like that. He knew the answer. He had calculated it. The 20th term was 6,765. He took a deep breath and wrote the answer down. The final moments of the round ticked by. Eli's pencil hovered over his paper as he double-checked his work. His heart was racing. Zayn still hadn't written anything, but that only made Eli more nervous. Was he missing something? What if Zayn had cracked the code that no one else could see? But there was no time to dwell on it now. Professor Miles walked to the front of the room, signaling the end of the round. "Time's up," he called. "Please hand in your papers." Eli glanced one last time at Zayn, who had yet to submit his paper. Zayn's calm expression remained unshaken, but Eli couldn't help but feel a flicker of doubt. Had Zayn done something different? Was he playing the game on a level Eli couldn't even understand? When Zayn finally handed in his paper, Eli followed suit, walking slowly to the front and placing his paper in the designated box. His hands were still shaking, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something important had just slipped through his fingers. The room emptied quickly as the morning session came to a close. Eli grabbed his bag and made his way to the exit, the sounds of the other competitors fading into the distance. Outside, the sun was high in the sky, casting long shadows on the ground. He sat on the steps of the auditorium, trying to steady his breath. His mind raced with questions. Had he done enough? What if he'd made a mistake? Zayn had been so calm throughout it all. So composed. Could he have been holding back, hiding his true abilities? His phone buzzed in his pocket, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was a message from his mom. How did it go? Eli typed back quickly, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "I think I did okay, but Zayn's really good. I don't know if I can beat him." He hit send, staring at the screen as he waited for her reply. He was still on edge, still unsure of what to expect. The competition wasn't over yet, but as the day wore on, Eli knew that the hardest part was just beginning. Zayn had given him a glimpse into what it took to be truly great. But now Eli had to find his own way forward, his own path to victory. It wouldn't be easy. But maybe, just maybe, he was starting to understand something that Zayn couldn't see. It wasn't just about winning. It was about proving to himself that he could do it. He could be just as good, if not better. It was his turn to make his mark. No one was going to hand him victory. Not even Zayn. The break between sessions was brief, but it was enough for Eli to sit outside and try to steady his mind. The sun was a little too bright, the air a little too warm, but the heat didn't bother him as much as the fire inside his chest. He couldn't stop thinking about Zayn. He was so calm. So effortless. Zayn had been the perfect image of a prodigy, but was that really all there was to him? Could Zayn's success be more than just raw talent? Eli couldn't help but wonder if there was something else behind it. Maybe it was his confidence, his ability to stay collected under pressure. Or maybe it was something deeper, something Eli hadn't yet tapped into. Eli stood up from the steps and stretched, hoping to shake off the doubts gnawing at him. He walked slowly back toward the auditorium, his feet dragging as though the weight of the contest was starting to pull him under. This was the moment where it could all go wrong. This was the part of the contest where only the strongest would survive. He entered the building and found a quiet corner where he could sit alone. His palms were clammy, his stomach in knots. The next round wasn't just another test, it was the one that could define everything. A voice broke through his thoughts. "Hey, Eli." He turned and saw Sarah standing there, holding her backpack. She was a fellow student at his school, one of the few who understood how much this contest meant to him. They'd spent hours studying together over the past few months, working through problems, trying to outdo each other to sharpen their skills. Sarah smiled, but it was a smile full of concern. She knew how much pressure Eli was under. "Are you okay?" she asked. Eli hesitated. "I don't know," he admitted. "I keep thinking about Zayn. He's so perfect at everything. What if I'm not cut out for this?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Perfect? Eli, come on. You're just as good. You're doing great so far. I mean, you're here, competing with the best." Eli shook his head. "Yeah, but Zayn's ahead of me. He doesn't even look worried. And me? I'm freaking out." Sarah took a step closer. "You can't let him get into your head. You're not here to beat Zayn. You're here to prove something to yourself. You're here because you're good, Eli. Don't lose sight of that." Eli glanced at the ground, the words sinking in. He had always put so much stock into what others thought, into beating the person next to him, but maybe Sarah was right. Maybe it wasn't about Zayn. Maybe it was about his own journey, his own growth. "I know. I just feel like I've reached my limit," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Like no matter how hard I try, it won't be enough." Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's not about limits. It's about pushing them. You've worked for this moment. You've earned your spot here. Don't let anyone, especially Zayn, make you doubt that." Eli managed a weak smile, but Sarah was right. If he wanted to be the best, he had to trust himself first. Not Zayn. Not anyone else. "I'll try," Eli said, his voice a little stronger now. She smiled back. "That's all anyone can ask. You've got this." The bell rang, signaling the start of the next round. The other competitors began to file into the room, but Eli stood still for a moment, gathering himself. He didn't know if he could beat Zayn. He didn't know if he could win. But he knew one thing, he had come too far to turn back now. He walked into the contest room, taking his seat at the long table where the others were already preparing. Zayn was there too, his usual calm demeanor in place, and Eli couldn't help but notice how different they were. Where Zayn exuded confidence, Eli felt like he was barely holding it together. But the difference wasn't just about how they looked. It was about the way they approached the contest. Zayn seemed to glide through the problems with ease, while Eli's mind raced a mile a minute. It wasn't about intelligence, it was about how each of them handled the pressure. Professor Miles entered the room and stood before the group, his serious expression letting everyone know that the next rounds would be the toughest yet. "All right," Professor Miles said, his voice low but commanding. "This is it. The final round before we break for lunch. You'll be presented with two problems. The first will test your problem-solving ability. The second will test your speed. There's no time to waste." Eli's heart raced. He knew what this meant. The speed problem was where the real challenge lay. Zayn was fast. He'd seen it firsthand. But could he keep up? Professor Miles gestured to the large screens above the room, and the first question flashed before them. "Solve the following equation for x, 3x superscript 2, 5x plus 2 is equal to 0. Eli's fingers went instinctively to his pencil. The equation wasn't hard. It was a basic quadratic equation, and he had solved dozens like it. He quickly grabbed the formula for solving quadratics in his mind. X equals minus b plus or minus b2 minus 4ac2 x equals backslash frac, b backslash pm backslash sqrt, b squared, for ac, 2a, x equals 2a minus b plus or minus b2 minus 4ac. Plugging in the numbers. X equals minus 5, plus or minus 5, 2 minus 4, 3, 2, 2, 3, x equals backslash frac, dash, minus 5, backslash pm backslash sqrt, minus 5, caret 2, 4, 3, 2, 2, 3, x equals 2, 3, minus 5, plus or minus 5, 2 minus 4, 3, 2. X equals 5 plus or minus 25 minus 246 x equals backslash frac, 5 backslash pm backslash sqrt, 25 to 24, 6, x equals 65 plus or minus 25 minus 24 x equals 5 plus or minus 16 x equals backslash frac, 5 backslash pm backslash sqrt, 1, 6. X equals 65 plus or minus 1 x equals 5 plus or minus 16 x equals backslash frac, 5 backslash pm 1, 6, x equals 65 plus or minus 1. The two possible values for triple x were x equals 66 equals 1 or x equals 46 equals 23 x equals backslash frac, 6, 6, equals 1 backslash quad backslash text, or backslash quad x equals backslash frac, 4, 6, equals backslash frac, 2, 3, x equals 66 equals 1 or x equals 64 equals 32. Eli wrote the answers down and quickly moved on. It was simple, but he had to make sure his work was clean, precise, and done quickly. He glanced over at Zayn. The other boy was already finishing his calculations, writing down his answer as though he were taking a stroll in the park. Eli's breath hitched. He couldn't afford to let Zayn get ahead again. He had to finish this round strong. As the next question appeared on the screen, Eli read it quickly. The second problem was a race against the clock. Professor Miles hadn't given them much time to work through it. But Eli was ready. He had trained for this. This was it. This was the moment where everything would be decided. The second problem appeared on the screen, and Eli's heart skipped a beat. It was a challenge unlike anything he'd faced before. The equation was complex, the numbers long and intimidating. There was no time for second guessing. This was it, his last chance to prove himself. The problem was a large system of equations, designed to test both speed and accuracy. It involved multiple variables and required careful manipulation to solve. For a moment, Eli felt his breath catch in his throat. The complexity of the question made the room feel smaller, as though the walls were closing in on him. But he couldn't let the fear take over. Eli quickly glanced at the clock in the corner of his vision. The timer was ticking down rapidly. He had only 5 minutes to complete the entire problem. He gripped his pencil tightly, biting his lip as he reviewed the problem. His mind raced. The steps seemed clear in his head: substitute values, simplify, solve, but every time he tried to start, the numbers seemed to blur together. It felt like there was no room for error. He had to be perfect. His eyes darted between the variables, trying to make sense of the mess of numbers in front of him. He wrote down the first equation, then the second, and began to work through the calculations, each step more difficult than the last. Meanwhile, Zayn was already moving on to the final part of the problem. His pencil moved quickly, almost effortlessly, across the page. Eli couldn't help but glance over at him. Zayn wasn't even breaking a sweat. He was so focused, so calm. It was almost as if solving complex equations was second nature to him. Eli swallowed hard and forced himself to keep going. He couldn't let Zayn's confidence distract him. He couldn't let it make him doubt his own abilities. His brain felt like it was firing on all cylinders, racing to keep up with the time ticking away in the corner. He solved the first part of the system, simplifying the equation until it was down to just one variable. His fingers moved as quickly as they could, solving for that variable, moving on to the next. With every passing second, the clock seemed to tick louder, more insistent. The pressure was suffocating. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and he wiped it away with the back of his hand. He was almost there, just a few more steps. His pencil scratched across the paper, and his heart raced faster. The numbers made sense now, he was on the right track. But the final answer seemed elusive, just out of reach. The room was silent except for the sound of pencils scribbling furiously, the occasional sound of someone flipping a page, and the ever-present ticking of the clock. Eli's mind was racing. He was so close. Then, out of nowhere, a flash of panic hit him. What if he'd made a mistake along the way? What if one small miscalculation had thrown everything off balance? His thoughts spiraled, and for a moment, he froze. His hand hovered over the paper, his pencil poised but motionless. Time seemed to stand still. He could feel the weight of the competition pressing down on him. He couldn't fail now. "Focus, Eli," he whispered to himself. "You can do this." The words seemed to snap him back to reality. His mind cleared for a brief moment, and the solution appeared. It wasn't just the numbers that made sense anymore, it was the logic behind it. The connections he had been trying to force came together naturally. He quickly finished the final steps of the calculation, finding the solution. The answer was clear. But there was no time to waste, he had to double-check his work. The seconds were ticking away. Every minute was a minute closer to the end. Eli took a deep breath and moved his pencil quickly, writing down the final answer. The problem was done. He had solved it. He felt a rush of relief wash over him. But then, he glanced at the clock. Only a minute left. His heart pounded as he stared at the screen, knowing there was nothing more he could do. Zayn had finished long before him, and from the look on his face, he was confident in his answer. But Eli couldn't afford to compare himself to Zayn anymore. He had done his best. That was all he could do. Professor Miles's voice cut through the silence. "Time's up," he called, his words echoing in the room. "Pens down, papers in." Eli stared at his paper for a moment longer, taking one last glance at his calculations. The answer was right. He was sure of it. His hand shook as he gathered his papers, his mind still racing, still reeling from the pressure. He slowly walked to the front of the room, his legs feeling heavy, like he was moving through molasses. He handed his paper to Professor Miles, his mind still buzzing with a mix of relief and anxiety. What if he had missed something? What if his answer wasn't as clean as he thought? Zayn was already standing by the door, chatting with a few of the other competitors, his usual calm composure in place. Eli couldn't help but notice how effortlessly Zayn seemed to glide through every challenge. It was like this competition was a game to him. Eli, on the other hand, had felt every minute of it, every ounce of stress and anxiety. Was that the difference between them? Zayn's natural ability versus Eli's relentless determination? Eli wasn't sure. But one thing was certain, he had given it everything he had. The contestants were dismissed for a lunch break, but Eli couldn't bring himself to eat. He sat in a corner of the cafeteria, staring at his empty tray, lost in thought. The room was filled with chatter, but all Eli could hear was the ticking of the clock in his mind, counting down the moments until the results would be announced. What if Zayn had already won? What if, despite everything, Eli wasn't good enough? The doubt crept back in, but this time, Eli pushed it away. He had done his best. He had solved the problems, faced the pressure head-on, and given everything he had. And no matter the outcome, that was something he could be proud of. As the break came to an end, the competitors filed back into the contest room. Professor Miles stood at the front, ready to announce the results. The air was thick with anticipation. Eli's palms were sweating again, but this time, it wasn't because of the competition. It was because of the realization that, for the first time, he had no regrets. The results would be what they would be. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The room was tense. Even the air seemed to be holding its breath as Professor Miles stepped forward, a pile of papers clutched in his hands. The other contestants sat in their chairs, fidgeting nervously, but Eli felt as though the world had slowed down. His mind was a storm of thoughts, self-doubt, excitement, fear. He had given his best, but would it be enough? The clock ticked in the back of his mind, the sound deafening in the silence. The other contestants were talking in hushed voices, but Eli couldn't make out the words. All he could focus on was the fact that the results were moments away from being revealed. Professor Miles cleared his throat and surveyed the room with a knowing gaze. His sharp eyes scanned the competitors, and Eli noticed how the professor's usual stern demeanor softened slightly. Perhaps, just for a moment, the competition had lost its formality, but it was only for a moment. The professor straightened his posture, and the tension in the room grew even thicker. "All right," Professor Miles said, his voice calm but firm. "It's time to announce the results of the final round." Eli's palms were sweating, his heart pounding. He glanced over at Zayn, who was still standing tall, a picture of composure. Zayn didn't even seem nervous. He was standing with his arms crossed, his face unreadable as always. Eli had a fleeting thought that maybe Zayn wasn't even trying. Maybe this was all too easy for him, and Eli's struggle was a result of his own self-imposed pressure. But it didn't matter now. He had done his part. The results were out of his hands. First, Professor Miles continued, "I want to acknowledge the effort of every contestant in this competition. It has been a long journey, and each of you has displayed extraordinary skill. But as we all know, there can only be one winner." Eli swallowed, his throat dry. The room fell even more silent as Professor Miles shuffled the papers in his hands. For a brief moment, it felt like time had stopped. And then, the professor looked directly at the contestants. "The top 3 winners of the contest will be announced now," he said. In third place, Zayn Fisher. There was a collective murmur from the crowd as Zayn nodded and stepped forward, accepting the congratulations of a few competitors. He looked unfazed, as though this was just another day. To some, it might have seemed like a minor setback, but for Eli, it was a startling development. Zayn, the one who had seemed invincible, was not in first place. Second place, Professor Miles continued, goes to Sarah Jones. Eli couldn't help but feel a rush of pride for Sarah. She had been his study partner throughout this contest, and she had pushed him to be better. Her smile lit up the room as she accepted her award, but Eli's stomach was still in knots. She had done great, but that meant one thing. There was only one person left. Professor Miles looked out over the room, and for a brief moment, Eli thought he saw something in his eyes, a glimmer of approval. Then, without further hesitation, Professor Miles spoke the words that Eli would remember for the rest of his life. "And in first place, Eli Bennett." Eli's heart stopped. The world around him seemed to spin as the words sunk in. First place? How was that possible? He looked up at Professor Miles, sure that he had misheard. But the professor was smiling. Eli's name had been called. He had won. The crowd erupted in applause, but it felt like a distant noise. Eli stood frozen for a moment, unable to move. His body felt heavy, as though the weight of the moment had just come crashing down on him all at once. He had won. He, Eli Bennett, had beaten Zayn Fisher. The genius. The prodigy. And somehow, he had come out on top. The applause seemed to grow louder, and Eli felt hands on his back. His classmates, his friends, were congratulating him, but his mind was still reeling. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't even considered it as a possibility. Slowly, he walked toward the front of the room, the path feeling like a mile long. His legs were shaking, his hands still trembling as he reached the podium where Professor Miles stood with a trophy in his hands. "Congratulations, Eli," the professor said, extending the trophy to him. You've earned it. Eli took the trophy, his fingers grazing the smooth surface. The weight of it felt strange in his hands. Was this really happening? Was this really his? He managed a smile, but it felt surreal. The entire contest had been a blur, a whirlwind of equations, stress, and pressure. And now, somehow, he was standing at the center of it all, holding the one thing that had seemed so out of reach. The applause didn't stop. Eli's classmates continued to cheer, but his mind kept returning to one thought, Zayn. He turned his gaze to the side, searching for Zayn in the crowd. Zayn was standing a little apart from the group, his expression unreadable. He didn't seem angry, but there was something else, something almost imperceptible in the way he looked at Eli. For a moment, Eli felt guilty. He had won, but at what cost? Zayn had been the one everyone expected to win. Zayn had been the one everyone thought was untouchable. But then Eli realized, he had earned this. He had worked harder than he ever had before. It wasn't just about beating Zayn, it was about proving to himself that he was capable of greatness. And today, he had done that. The applause eventually died down, but the weight of the moment lingered. Professor Miles gave him a congratulatory handshake, and Eli took a deep breath. He had done it. He had truly done it. As the crowd dispersed, Eli found himself standing alone, still holding the trophy. He looked down at it, feeling a strange mix of pride and disbelief. The hard work, the long nights of studying, the self-doubt, all of it had led him here. And now, he was at the top. But the journey wasn't over. Eli knew this was just the beginning. There would always be more challenges, more obstacles to face. And who knew? Maybe next time, Zayn would come back stronger. But for now, Eli had won. And that victory was something no one could take away from him. Eli stood in front of his mirror, staring at the shiny trophy resting on his desk. It felt unreal, like it belonged in a dream. His reflection stared back at him, but it wasn't just Eli anymore. It was Eli Bennett, the winner of the National Math Contest. The same Eli who had struggled with self-doubt and nearly given up on his dreams of proving himself worthy. The one who had sat alone at lunch, kept his head down in class, and shied away from the spotlight. And now, here he was. The weight of the trophy felt heavy in his hands, but it was a different kind of weight. It was the weight of victory, of having accomplished something incredible. He had faced Zayn, no, he had faced the idea of Zayn, and emerged victorious. But even as the pride swelled within him, a part of Eli couldn't quite let go of the nagging question that had been creeping into his mind since the moment the contest ended. What now? The applause had faded, the crowd had dispersed, and even Zayn had quietly congratulated him before walking away to join his friends. Eli had expected more emotion, more drama, but it had been muted. Zayn hadn't seemed bothered by losing at all. Eli had expected some grand gesture, some sign of defeat from Zayn, but there had been none. Zayn had simply smiled and clapped, as if he had always known this moment would come. Now, Eli was left alone with the trophy. It was a strange feeling, knowing that his victory had left a trail of confusion in its wake. He should have been celebrating, right? He should have been basking in the glory of beating the genius everyone had expected to win. But it felt empty, somehow. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. Eli reached for it, still unsure if he wanted to answer. He didn't know if he was ready to deal with the world outside his room just yet. But then he saw the name on the screen. Sarah. With a sigh, Eli answered the call. Hey. Hey, you, Sarah's voice came through the phone, bright and cheerful, a welcome contrast to the heavy thoughts clouding Eli's mind. So, what are you doing to celebrate? Eli smiled weakly. Not much. Just, thinking. Thinking. Sarah laughed. You've just won the biggest contest of your life, and you're sitting around thinking? I guess, Eli muttered. I don't know, Sarah. It just doesn't feel like I expected it to. There was a pause on the other end. You've been working for this moment for so long, Eli. You've earned it. You're allowed to feel however you want. But don't let the pressure of what comes next ruin it. This is a huge deal, and you need to enjoy it, even if it feels weird. Eli could hear the sincerity in her voice. Sarah had been there through every late-night study session, every doubt he had expressed about his abilities. She understood what this meant more than anyone. I don't know what comes next, Eli admitted. I've won, but now I feel like there's more expected of me. Like I have to keep proving myself. Sarah's voice softened. That's normal. But you don't have to keep proving anything to anyone. Just keep being you. You did something incredible, and the rest will follow. If you're ready for it, that is. Eli felt a knot in his chest loosen. Sarah had a way of making things seem clearer, even when his mind was clouded with doubt. He smiled, genuinely this time. Thanks, Sarah. I needed that. You're welcome. And you know what? I'll be in town tomorrow. I'm taking you out to dinner to celebrate. No excuses. I'm bringing you back down to earth. Eli chuckled. All right. You win. They chatted a bit longer, but Eli's mind was still racing with thoughts of the future. What would happen now? Would people start expecting him to be some sort of math genius? Would he have to live up to a standard that he wasn't sure he could maintain? His phone buzzed again, interrupting his thoughts. This time, it was a message from his mom. I'm so proud of you, Eli. We'll talk more when you're home, but I just wanted to say congratulations again. This is your moment. Don't forget it. Her words were comforting, but they also added to the weight he felt. This was his moment, but what came after moments like this? Where did he go once he had achieved the unthinkable? What else was there to do if he had already reached the pinnacle of what he thought was possible? Later that night, Eli found himself walking through the park near his house, the evening air cool against his skin. He had wanted some time to clear his head, away from the chaos of the day. The park was nearly empty, save for a few joggers and a couple walking their dog. It was peaceful, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Eli could hear his own thoughts. What did he want? Was math all there was to his future, or was this contest just a stepping stone to something else? He stopped at the edge of the lake, watching as the moonlight shimmered across the water. The stillness of the scene made him feel small in a way, but it also reminded him that there was more to life than just winning competitions. His mind kept drifting back to the question that had been eating at him all day: what now? He had beaten Zayn. He had conquered his fears. But what if this was just the beginning? What if this victory opened up a world of expectations he wasn't ready for? Hey, Eli. A familiar voice broke through his thoughts. Eli turned to see Sarah approaching, her hands in the pockets of her hoodie. I thought I'd find you here. Eli managed a grin. What? You stalking me now? No, just worried you'd disappear into the ether after your big win, Sarah teased. You good? Eli shrugged, his mind still elsewhere. I don't know. It's just, a lot. I don't feel as excited as I thought I would. I feel. I don't know. Heavy. Sarah stepped closer, her gaze understanding. I get it. The pressure can be overwhelming. But Eli, you've earned this. You've proved you're capable of great things, and I think that's something you need to hold on to. You don't have to have everything figured out right now. Eli stared at the lake for a moment longer, the silence between them comfortable. Slowly, he turned to Sarah. I guess I'll figure it out. You always do, she said, smiling softly. You're Eli Bennett. You don't back down from anything. Eli smiled, the weight lifting just a little. He didn't know what the future would hold, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he could take it one step at a time. The days following the contest were a blur of interviews, congratulatory messages, and an overwhelming flood of attention. Eli had expected some recognition for his victory, but nothing could have prepared him for just how much his life would change in such a short amount of time. Everywhere he went, people seemed to know his name. The local news covered his win, his school had organized a parade in his honor, and even the math club was constantly asking for his advice. He could no longer walk down the hallway without a few people stopping to shake his hand or ask for a selfie. At first, it was exciting. There was a thrill in the attention, a rush that came with knowing he had accomplished something so extraordinary. But as the days went on, Eli began to feel suffocated by the weight of everyone's expectations. The pressure was relentless. His teachers, once just a part of his routine, now looked at him as though he had become some kind of living legend. "We're so proud of you, Eli," they would say. "You're destined for greatness. This is just the beginning." And it was, in a way. But Eli wasn't sure if he was ready for it to be his beginning. He wasn't sure he even wanted the kind of future everyone seemed to envision for him. Sitting in his room that night, staring at the trophy on his desk, Eli felt a strange emptiness. This was supposed to be his moment, the moment that defined him. But now, all it did was make him feel like he was standing at the edge of something he wasn't sure he was ready to face. He had received offers to speak at various events, invitations to attend special math camps, and even scholarship offers from prestigious universities. But as each email and phone call came in, Eli found himself more and more hesitant to embrace it all. What if it was all too much? What if he wasn't as ready for the spotlight as everyone thought? Eli had always been the quiet kid, the one who preferred the solitude of his own thoughts to the constant attention of others. Sure, he had dreamed of winning the contest, of proving himself to the world, but now that it had actually happened, he wasn't sure if he was prepared for the life that awaited him. His phone buzzed, and Eli glanced at the screen. It was a text from Sarah. "Dinner tomorrow? We can talk about everything, and I'll make sure you don't get too caught up in all the chaos." Eli smiled faintly at the message. Sarah had been his anchor through this whole journey. She was the only one who seemed to understand the conflicting emotions swirling inside him. And right now, he needed someone who didn't see him as the prodigy, the genius, or the hero. Just Eli. The boy who loved math but didn't know what to do with it all. He quickly typed back, "Sounds good. I need a break from all of this." The next evening, Eli and Sarah met at their favorite diner. The familiar hum of conversation and clinking dishes was a welcome change from the buzz of his life lately. As soon as Eli sat down across from her, he felt his shoulders relax. Sarah didn't look at him with admiration or expectation, she looked at him like she always had, like a friend. "So," Sarah said, stirring her milkshake with a straw, "how's the whole living legend thing going?" Eli chuckled, though it was more out of relief than amusement. "I think I'm losing my mind." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Really? It doesn't look that bad. I mean, sure, it's a lot of attention, but you've always been good at handling pressure." Eli leaned back in his seat, running a hand through his hair. "It's not the pressure that's getting to me. It's everything else. All the expectations, the opportunities. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with all of it." "I get it," Sarah said softly. "Everyone's telling you what you should do, right?" "Exactly," Eli replied, nodding. "Everyone thinks I should go to a top university, become some kind of math genius, speak at all these events. But I don't even know if I want that. I don't know if it's what I want to do." Sarah took a long sip of her milkshake and then set it down, her expression thoughtful. "So, what do you want to do?" Eli was silent for a moment, staring at the table. The truth was, he didn't know. Part of him still loved math, still wanted to explore the beauty of numbers and equations. But another part of him longed for something else, a simpler life, away from the pressure and the spotlight. Maybe he didn't want to be the next great mathematician. Maybe he just wanted to be Eli Bennett, a kid who loved solving puzzles in his spare time. I don't know, Eli said, his voice barely above a whisper. I feel like I'm supposed to have everything figured out now. Like I'm supposed to have some grand vision of my future. But I don't. I just want to be, me. Then be that, Sarah said firmly, her voice full of conviction. You don't have to live up to anyone's idea of who you should be. You can make your own path. Take your time. It's okay not to have everything figured out right away. Eli looked up at her, surprised by her words. It was so simple, yet so powerful. Sarah always seemed to know what to say when he needed it the most. He had spent so much time worrying about other people's expectations that he had forgotten to think about his own. I think I needed to hear that, Eli said, smiling for the first time in what felt like days. Anytime, Sarah said, grinning. But seriously, Eli, you've got the world at your feet. Don't let anyone else tell you how to walk. As the evening went on, they talked about everything, life, school, their plans for the future, but the conversation kept circling back to one thing, Eli's choice. What was he going to do with all of this? Would he take the easy path and follow the expectations laid out for him? Or would he carve his own way, even if it meant taking a risk? Eli didn't have all the answers, but for the first time since the contest, he felt like it was okay not to know. He didn't have to have everything figured out. What mattered was that he made a choice that felt right for him. As he left the diner later that night, Eli felt lighter than he had in days. The future was still uncertain, but it was his future to shape. And for the first time, he was ready to face whatever came next, on his own terms. The week after his dinner with Sarah was a whirlwind of decisions. Eli was still riding the wave of his victory, but the euphoria of the moment had started to fade, replaced by the overwhelming reality of his newfound fame. He had agreed to speak at a local school's math event, and more invitations had rolled in. It seemed everyone wanted a piece of him now. It wasn't just the interviews and events that weighed on him, it was the responsibility that came with it. He had become something of a role model, whether he was ready for it or not. And with that responsibility came expectations. People wanted him to be a perfect example of what success in math, and life, looked like. At first, it felt thrilling. It felt like he was finally part of something bigger than himself. But as the days went by, Eli began to feel like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. He didn't want to disappoint anyone, especially the people who had placed their faith in him. But at the same time, he didn't want to lose sight of who he really was, just a normal kid who loved math but wasn't sure what his future should look like. One afternoon, Eli sat at his desk, staring at the countless emails in his inbox. Invitations to speak at conferences. Offers for tutoring gigs. Even some from prestigious universities asking if he'd consider attending their programs. His head swirled with possibilities, and each option felt more overwhelming than the last. What's wrong with me? Eli muttered to himself, running his hands through his hair. I should be excited about all this, right? But the truth was, he wasn't sure anymore. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that he had no idea where he was heading. Sure, he had conquered the contest, but what did that really mean? Was he supposed to dedicate his entire life to math? Was that all he was good for now? He leaned back in his chair, eyes closing as he let out a frustrated sigh. The noise outside his window seemed distant, like he was in a bubble, cut off from the world around him. The truth was, he wasn't sure how to step out of that bubble. He was so wrapped up in everyone else's ideas of who he was supposed to be that he had forgotten what it was like to just be Eli. His phone buzzed again, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from his mom. How's everything going, sweetie? Don't forget to take some time for yourself. Her words hit him harder than he expected. He had been so focused on pleasing everyone else that he hadn't even noticed how much he had been neglecting his own needs. He wasn't happy. Not truly. He glanced at the clock, it was getting late. He needed to clear his mind. The next day, Eli went for a walk to get some air. He needed to escape the constant flood of thoughts swirling around him. The park was quiet, save for a few people jogging or walking their dogs. He strolled aimlessly, not really sure where he was going. It was the one place he could be alone with his thoughts without feeling like he was being pulled in a million directions. He reached the lake again, the same spot he had visited after the contest. The moonlight was just beginning to reflect off the surface of the water, and the air felt cooler than it had been in days. Eli leaned against a nearby tree, looking out at the water, letting the peacefulness of the scene wash over him. "What's going on with you, Eli?" he muttered, shaking his head. "Why is this so hard?" His thoughts were interrupted by a voice. "You've been avoiding everyone, haven't you?" Eli turned to find Sarah standing a few feet away, her arms crossed as she gave him an amused look. "I wasn't avoiding anyone," Eli replied, though he knew it wasn't entirely true. Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Really? Because it sure seems like you've been trying to escape the world. Everyone's been wondering where you've gone. Including me." Eli let out a sigh. "It's just, everything's changing so fast, Sarah. I don't know how to handle it." "Yeah," Sarah said, stepping closer, "I can imagine. But you're not the first person to go through this. It's called pressure." Eli laughed bitterly. "I thought I wanted it. I thought I wanted to be the guy who wins, who gets all the attention. But now that it's all here, it feels like I'm drowning in it. Like I have to be perfect all the time." "You're human, Eli. You don't have to be perfect," Sarah said, her voice gentle. "That's the thing people don't always get. They put you on a pedestal because they think you're some kind of genius. But you're just you." "But what if being me isn't enough anymore?" Eli asked, his voice low. "What if everyone expects me to be this perfect role model, the math genius who can do no wrong?" Sarah shook her head. "You don't owe anyone anything. You've already done something incredible. But you don't have to carry the weight of everyone's expectations on your shoulders. You're not responsible for what other people think you should be. You're responsible for your own happiness." Eli stood in silence, letting her words sink in. She was right. He had been so focused on living up to other people's ideas of who he was that he had forgotten about what really mattered. He had won, yes, but that didn't mean he had to sacrifice himself in the process. "I think I needed to hear that," Eli said, a weight lifting off his chest. Sarah smiled. "Anytime, Eli. You've got this." As they walked back to the main road, Eli felt lighter. He still didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was on the right path. He didn't have to figure everything out today, and he didn't have to live up to anyone's expectations. He could just be himself. Later that night, Eli sat down at his desk again. He opened up his inbox one last time and scrolled through the various messages. Instead of feeling overwhelmed, he now felt more confident in his choices. He was going to take things slow. He didn't need to make any big decisions immediately. He would pick the opportunities that felt right, and he would say no to the ones that didn't align with who he was. For the first time since the contest, Eli smiled. It wasn't a forced smile or a smile for the camera. It was a real smile, the kind that came from inside, from the knowledge that he was finally starting to live for himself. And that, Eli realized, was worth more than any trophy. The days seemed to blur together in a chaotic mix of opportunities, decisions, and quiet moments of reflection. Eli had spent the past few weeks weighing every option laid before him. He had started turning down some of the speaking engagements, politely declining the offers to attend prestigious universities, and for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was in control of his own story. It wasn't easy, though. The world still had expectations, and the pressure to fulfill them hung over him like a cloud. Friends and family would occasionally ask, "Have you decided yet? Where are you going to study? What's next for you, Eli?" And every time, he found himself struggling to answer. The truth was, he still didn't know. But there was one thing he did know: he didn't want to be defined by just one thing, by just math. It wasn't that he didn't love the subject, far from it. Math was the puzzle he had always adored, the quiet escape he could dive into for hours without thinking about anything else. But he had come to realize that there was more to life than just solving equations. Eli had always been a quiet kid, content in his own space. But after the contest, he felt like he was suddenly a symbol of success, an emblem of what happens when someone is good at something. He was no longer just Eli Bennett, the kid who loved math and spent his free time reading textbooks. He was Eli Bennett, the math prodigy, the genius who had beaten a whole field of talented students. And somehow, that was both exciting and suffocating. It was on a particularly quiet Sunday afternoon that Eli decided to take a step back and think about what he really wanted. The city felt distant, like an entire world away as he sat in his bedroom, staring out the window at the trees swaying in the breeze. He thought about the future. He thought about the past. And then, without thinking too much about it, he grabbed his phone and texted Sarah. "I need to get away for a while. Just need to clear my head. Can we hang out this weekend?" It didn't take long for her to reply, "Of course." "Where do you want to go?" Eli smiled. He didn't have all the answers yet, but he knew he needed to take a break from the pressure and just be himself for a while. The weekend arrived, and Eli found himself in the same park he had visited so many times before, the one by the lake, where the world felt like it slowed down for just a moment. Sarah met him there, and they spent the day walking along the trails, talking about everything and nothing at all. For once, Eli felt like he could breathe freely again, without the weight of expectations or the pressure of his newfound fame. They stopped at their usual spot by the water, and Eli sat down on the grass, staring at the shimmering surface. It was peaceful here. No cameras. No math contests. No endless invitations. Just him and Sarah. And for the first time in weeks, he felt at ease. "I've been thinking a lot lately," Eli said, breaking the silence. "Oh," Sarah replied, laughing. "When you say that, I know it's going to be deep." Eli grinned. "Well, it is. I don't know. I've been wondering if I'm chasing the right things." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, sitting down next to him. "I mean, the whole reason I entered the math contest was because I loved math. But now that I've won, it feels like the world expects me to turn that into something huge, like I'm supposed to build my entire life around it." Sarah nodded, taking in his words. "I get that. It's like everyone else sees you as this big thing, but they don't understand that it's still just math to you. It's something you enjoy, not something that has to define you." "Exactly," Eli said, his voice full of relief. "And I've been so caught up in everyone else's idea of success that I forgot to ask myself what I really want. I don't want to be just a math guy. I want to be Eli, the guy who's passionate about so many things. I want to be someone who has the freedom to explore everything, not just be boxed in by one thing." Sarah smiled, her eyes full of understanding. "So, what are you going to do about it?" Eli took a deep breath, feeling a sense of clarity he hadn't experienced in weeks. "I think I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to say no to the things that don't align with who I am. I'm going to focus on finding balance in my life, because that's what really matters to me." "That's the right choice, Eli," Sarah said, her voice full of confidence. "It's your life, and you don't have to follow anyone else's path. You're not obligated to live up to anyone's expectations." Eli nodded. It wasn't going to be easy, but he was starting to see a way forward. He could still pursue his love for math, but he didn't have to let it consume him. He could choose his own path and take the time to explore other interests, maybe even things he hadn't considered before. "You're right," Eli said, a weight lifting from his shoulders. "I need to stop worrying about what everyone else thinks. I need to live for myself." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. Eli realized that, for the first time in a long time, he wasn't running away from anything. He was walking towards something, a future that was entirely his to create. The following week, Eli took action. He called up the organizers of the upcoming math conference and politely declined the invitation. He sent out a few more emails, turning down the offers from universities that he knew weren't right for him. It felt freeing to make these decisions, to take control of his future in a way that felt true to himself. But it wasn't just about saying no, it was also about saying yes to the things that excited him. Eli had always loved playing the guitar, a hobby he'd kept to himself for years. He decided to take up lessons again, to explore that passion more deeply. And he began reading books outside of math, science fiction, history, and philosophy. He wanted to be more than just the kid who won the math contest. He wanted to be someone who was constantly learning, growing, and evolving. One evening, as Eli sat with his guitar in hand, strumming softly, his phone buzzed. It was a message from his mom. "Hey, I've been hearing a lot about the changes you're making. Just want to remind you that no matter what, we're proud of you. You don't have to follow anyone's expectations, Eli. We love you just the way you are." Eli smiled, a sense of warmth flooding his chest. It was just the reminder he needed. He didn't have to be anyone else. He was enough, exactly as he was. As he strummed the final chord, Eli made a vow to himself, to live life on his own terms, to embrace all the passions that made him who he was, and to trust that the right opportunities would come when the time was right. The road ahead was still uncertain, but Eli no longer feared it. Instead, he was excited to see where it would lead. It had been a month since Eli had made the decision to step back and take control of his own life. In that time, he'd found peace in small moments. Playing guitar on lazy evenings, reading books that sparked his curiosity, and spending time with friends like Sarah, who had become a constant source of support. He was no longer just the kid who won the math contest, he was Eli, a young man with a variety of interests, passions, and dreams. But despite this newfound freedom, there were moments when doubt crept in. Eli still had his moments of insecurity, the kind of moments that made him question whether he was making the right choices. Was he throwing away an opportunity for greatness? Was he being selfish by not fully embracing the fame that came with his success? It all came to a head one crisp Saturday morning when Eli received an unexpected phone call. The number wasn't familiar, and when he answered, it was a voice he had heard before, one that sent a shiver down his spine. "Eli Bennett," the voice asked, smooth and professional. "This is Professor Hill from the National Math Institute. We've been following your progress since your victory in the contest. We'd like to extend an invitation for you to participate in an exclusive summer research program." Eli's heart skipped a beat. He had heard of the National Math Institute, a prestigious institution that worked with some of the brightest minds in the field. This was the kind of opportunity that he had dreamed of as a kid, the kind of invitation that most people could only fantasize about. It was a golden ticket. But as the professor continued outlining the details of the program, Eli's mind began to race. He had already made the decision to step away from the limelight, to focus on his personal growth and explore other passions. He didn't want to be consumed by math, no matter how enticing the opportunity was. But at the same time, the pressure was undeniable. Was he making the right choice by turning this down? Was he throwing away a chance at greatness? After a long pause, Eli spoke, his voice quieter than he intended. I appreciate the offer, Professor Hill. But I'm going to have to decline." There was a slight hesitation on the other end of the line before the professor responded. "I understand, Eli. But if you change your mind, the offer still stands. You have great potential. Just remember that these opportunities don't come around often." The conversation ended shortly after, and Eli sat in stunned silence. He had said no. Again. He had been so sure about his decision, so certain that he was doing the right thing. But in that moment, doubt began to flood his mind. Maybe he was making a mistake. Maybe he was giving up on something that could change his life forever. Later that day, Eli found himself walking to the park again. His thoughts were a jumbled mess, and he needed the clarity that the peacefulness of the lake often provided. As he approached the familiar spot, he saw Sarah sitting on the bench, her legs crossed, staring at the water. She looked up as he approached, a soft smile forming on her face. "You look like you've got something heavy on your mind," she said, standing up to greet him. Eli nodded, feeling the weight of his decisions. "I just got off the phone with the National Math Institute. They offered me a spot in their summer research program." Sarah raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Wow, that's huge. What did you say?" "I turned it down," Eli said, his voice heavy. I don't know. I've been thinking about it all day. I feel like I made the right choice, but at the same time, it feels like I'm walking away from something I've worked so hard for. What if this is my chance to do something big?" Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder, her voice calm and reassuring. "Eli, I get it. But remember why you stepped back in the first place. You didn't want to be defined by one thing, and you didn't want to lose yourself in something that wasn't right for you. This is just a test of whether you've learned from your own choices." Eli let out a frustrated breath, running his fingers through his hair. "I keep thinking that maybe I'm being selfish. Like maybe I should just go for it. Everyone says I have so much potential. I don't want to waste it." "You're not wasting anything," Sarah said, her words firm but kind. "You're doing what's right for you. Success isn't just about what other people expect of you, it's about what makes you happy. If math doesn't feel like the right path anymore, then that's okay. But don't let fear of missing out decide for you." Eli stared at the lake, watching the ripples in the water. Her words were comforting, but the nagging voice in his head wouldn't stop. What if he was making a huge mistake? What if this was the one opportunity that could change everything? "Do you ever wonder if we make the right choices?" Eli asked softly, his gaze still fixed on the water. Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "I think we all wonder that sometimes," she said finally. "But sometimes, the right choice isn't the one that everyone else would make. It's the one that feels true to you. You've already proven you can do amazing things, Eli. And if you choose a different path, that's okay too." Eli nodded, but the doubt still lingered. It was hard to let go of the dream that had defined him for so long. He had spent years imagining a future where he was the one at the forefront of mathematical discovery, the one who solved problems no one else could. The National Math Institute was a place where that dream could come true. But now, the dream felt different. It felt like a weight, something that was dragging him down instead of lifting him up. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange, Eli felt a strange sense of clarity. Maybe he wasn't meant to be the next big thing in math. Maybe he was meant for something else, something that could still involve math but wasn't entirely defined by it. The truth was, he wasn't sure what that something else looked like yet, but for the first time, that uncertainty didn't scare him. He looked at Sarah, a small smile tugging at his lips. "I think I'm starting to get it. I don't have to follow a specific path to be successful. I just have to follow the path that feels right for me." Sarah returned his smile. "Exactly. And I'll be here no matter what path you choose." For the first time in a long while, Eli felt at peace. The pressure had begun to lift, and though the future was still uncertain, he knew he wasn't walking alone. Eli stood on the edge of a new chapter in his life. The days since he'd turned down the prestigious opportunity at the National Math Institute had been filled with uncertainty, but also with a newfound sense of freedom. The nagging doubts that had once plagued him slowly started to fade, replaced by a sense of purpose that came from doing what felt right. It had been a week since that fateful conversation with Sarah in the park, and things were starting to settle. His decision had been hard, but he no longer regretted it. The feeling of standing at a crossroads, wondering which path to take, had given way to an understanding. It wasn't about choosing the path that looked the best from the outside, it was about finding the one that made him feel whole. Eli had spent the days since his decision reflecting on what truly mattered to him. He had always loved math, but as he spent more time outside the world of equations and formulas, he realized that what he truly wanted was to inspire others. To help young people see math not just as a subject to master, but as a way of thinking, a lens through which they could view the world. He didn't want to be just a name on a trophy or a face on a magazine cover. He wanted to make an impact in a more meaningful way. So, after much thought, Eli made a bold decision: he would start tutoring. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about helping others discover the same love for math that he had found, even if it didn't fit the conventional mold of success. And, more than anything, it was about giving back, about finding a way to use his talents for good, in a way that felt authentic to who he was. The first day of tutoring was a mix of excitement and nerves. Eli had put up flyers around his neighborhood offering free math tutoring for middle and high school students. It wasn't about the money. It was about creating a space where students could learn without fear of failure, a place where they could ask questions without feeling judged. To his surprise, the response was overwhelming. Students from all walks of life signed up, eager for help with everything from basic algebra to calculus. Eli had always been good at explaining complex concepts in simple terms, and he found that teaching others was just as rewarding as solving a difficult problem himself. But there was one student who stood out among the rest, a girl named Mia. She was a shy, quiet girl who had always struggled with math. Her grades were poor, and she had been told by several teachers that she wasn't math-minded. That label, which she had carried for years, had weighed heavily on her, and she had come to believe it herself. The first time Mia walked into Eli's tutoring session, she looked uncertain, almost afraid. Her hands were tightly gripping the strap of her backpack, and her eyes avoided contact. She had the look of someone who had been told, time and time again, that she just wasn't good enough. But Eli saw something in her, something familiar. He had once been in her shoes, doubting himself and feeling like he wasn't enough. He knew exactly how it felt to be told you weren't capable, to be told that something was beyond your reach. "Hey, Mia," Eli said warmly, offering her a smile. "You ready to tackle some math?" She hesitated, then nodded, her eyes flickering up to meet his. I'm not sure I can do this." Eli sat down across from her, not in a position of authority, but as an equal. "I know it feels tough, but I promise you, you can do it. We'll take it slow, and I'll help you every step of the way." Over the next few weeks, Eli worked with Mia closely. He didn't rush her. He didn't pressure her to keep up with the others. He simply encouraged her to ask questions, to keep trying, and most importantly, to believe in herself. Slowly but surely, Mia's confidence began to grow. She started coming to tutoring sessions with a sense of eagerness, and her understanding of math deepened. One day, after solving a particularly tricky problem, Mia's eyes widened in surprise. "I did it," she whispered, almost in disbelief. Eli smiled, watching the realization dawn on her. "See? I told you, you're more than capable. It's just about taking it one step at a time." That moment was a turning point, not just for Mia, but for Eli as well. He realized that helping others understand math wasn't just about solving problems. It was about building confidence, breaking down barriers, and showing people that they were capable of more than they thought. As Eli continued tutoring, he began to see how much of a difference he could make. It wasn't about impressing anyone or gaining recognition. It was about the small moments, the quiet victories, the light in a student's eyes when they finally grasped a concept they had struggled with for so long. But there was more to Eli's journey than tutoring. As he helped his students, he also started thinking about his future. He had made the decision to turn down the National Math Institute, but that didn't mean he was abandoning his love for math altogether. He still wanted to explore it, but on his own terms. And that meant finding a balance between his passions for math, his desire to help others, and his thirst for personal growth. One afternoon, while he was tutoring Mia, she asked him a question that caught him off guard. "Eli," she said, looking up from her notebook, "why did you decide to do this? I mean, you could be at some big university, or working on your own math research. Why are you helping us?" Eli thought for a moment, the weight of the question settling in. "I guess," he said slowly, "I realize that math isn't just about solving problems on paper. It's about helping people see the world differently, and giving them the tools to solve their own problems. I don't want to just be the kid who wins math contests. I want to be the person who helps others find their own path." Mia smiled, a glimmer of understanding in her eyes. "That's really cool, Eli. I wish I had known that earlier." Eli grinned, feeling a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced in a long time. It's never too late to start. As the months went on, Eli's tutoring sessions continued to grow. His reputation as a mentor spread, and more students sought him out. But more than that, Eli had found something he hadn't even realized he was searching for, a sense of purpose that transcended his success in math contests. He was doing something that mattered. He was helping others believe in themselves and showing them that they were capable of achieving things they never thought possible. And that, he realized, was the true legacy he wanted to leave behind, not a list of accolades or a career built on solving equations, but a life lived in service to others, a life that inspired others to discover their own potential. Eli had come a long way since he turned down the prestigious opportunity at the National Math Institute. He had embraced his new role as a mentor, teaching young students the power of perseverance and problem-solving. But as he entered his senior year of high school, he began to sense that his path, though fulfilling, was only a part of the larger picture. One evening, as Eli was walking home from one of his tutoring sessions, he received a message that shook him to the core. It was from Professor Hill, the same professor who had offered him the research opportunity months ago. The message was simple, yet it carried the weight of a lifetime's worth of choices. "Eli, I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to inform you that there is a new program opening up at the National Math Institute, one that focuses on mentorship and helping young mathematicians develop their own projects. We believe you would be an excellent fit for this program. It could be a fantastic opportunity to blend your passion for mentoring with cutting-edge mathematical research. Please let me know if you're interested. Best, Professor Hill." Eli stared at the message, the weight of it sinking in. It wasn't just an invitation to join a prestigious program, it was an invitation to re-enter a world that he had deliberately distanced himself from. A world that represented everything he had walked away from. The truth was, Eli had always wondered if he had made the right choice by turning down the National Math Institute. Though he found joy in teaching and mentoring, a part of him still longed for the intellectual challenges of math at its highest level. He had denied that part of himself, telling himself that his real purpose was to help others. But now, the opportunity had come back into his life, and he had to confront the question that had been simmering in his mind for months: was he truly ready to give up on his potential for greatness? For the next few days, Eli wrestled with the decision. His mind would drift back to the words that Professor Hill had used in the past: "You have great potential. Don't let it go to waste." The phrase echoed in his thoughts, mixing with the new lessons he had learned from his work with his students. He had taught them about resilience, about not giving up on their dreams, about the importance of pursuing what felt true to them. But now, it was time for Eli to practice those lessons himself. Was he really walking away from his own dream for the right reasons? That evening, he found himself once again at the park, sitting by the same lake where he had made the decision to step away from the contest world. He had always turned to this place when he needed clarity. As the sky turned shades of purple and orange, Eli thought about everything that had brought him here: the contests, the math, the doubts, and the choices he had made along the way. "I don't know what to do," he said aloud, as though the stillness of the lake might offer him an answer. It was then that Sarah appeared, walking slowly towards him. She had a knowing look on her face, as if she could sense the storm brewing inside him. She sat down next to him without a word, and for a moment, they both simply watched the water ripple in the quiet evening. "You've been quiet lately," Sarah said after a long pause. "What's going on?" Eli exhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on him. "I've been offered another chance. The National Math Institute reached out to me. They want me to join a mentorship program, where I'd help other students and work on research projects. It's exactly what I thought I wanted all those months ago. But now, I don't know if it's the right choice." Sarah turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "Why do you think it's not the right choice?" Eli shrugged, the uncertainty in his eyes betraying the calm exterior he tried to maintain. "Because I thought I was done with all of it. I walked away from math contests, from the pressure, because I wanted to focus on something that felt more real, something that would let me help others. But this feels like I'm being pulled back into that world I tried to escape. I thought I was choosing something more meaningful." "And now you feel like you failed?" Sarah asked, her tone gentle but probing. "I don't know," Eli admitted, his voice cracking slightly. "I just don't want to be the kind of person who chases something just for the sake of recognition. But at the same time, this opportunity feels like it's in line with what I want, helping others, making a real difference in the field. But I don't want to lose myself in it. I don't want to forget what really matters." Sarah smiled softly, her eyes filled with understanding. "Eli, I think you've done more for people than you realize. The fact that you're struggling with this decision means you're not just chasing after fame or success. You're thinking about what it means to be truly happy, and to help others in a way that's meaningful. You've already built something special with your tutoring, and that's not something that can be taken away." Eli nodded slowly, grateful for her words. "But what if I'm just scared to step back into the world I once left behind? What if I'm running away from something I'm actually meant to do?" "You're not running away," Sarah said firmly. "You're not abandoning anything. You're just evolving. Sometimes, growth means revisiting things you thought you were done with. You've changed, Eli. And whatever decision you make now, it will be because it feels right for who you are today, not who you were yesterday." Her words resonated deeply within him. It wasn't about running away from his past or rejecting math altogether. It was about embracing who he was becoming, someone who could balance his love for math with his desire to help others. He didn't have to be defined by a single path. He could create his own, one that allowed him to integrate his passion with his purpose. The next day, Eli sent a response to Professor Hill. He thanked him for the opportunity, expressing his gratitude but also explaining that, while the mentorship program sounded incredible, he had decided to continue focusing on his tutoring and personal growth. It was the right decision for him at this moment in his life. As Eli sat back after sending the email, he felt a sense of peace settle over him. The storm had passed, and he knew that he had made the right choice. Not because it was the easiest choice, but because it was the one that felt true to him. In that moment, Eli realized that life wasn't about following a prescribed path or seeking validation from others. It was about finding strength in one's own choices and understanding that true fulfillment came from living authentically. Eli had found his path, and he was ready to walk it with his head held high. The air felt different that morning. It wasn't anything tangible, not in the way the wind could stir the trees or the sun could warm your skin. It was the kind of difference that lived inside Eli, deep within his chest, pulsing with a quiet but persistent excitement. The future, which had once felt so uncertain, now seemed full of promise. He could feel it in every step he took as he walked to his tutoring session that day. It had been 6 months since he had made the decision to step away from the competitive world of math contests. The world that had once defined him now felt like a distant memory, a part of his past that had helped shape who he was, but no longer dictated his future. His purpose was clear now, he was here to help others find their path, just as he had found his. Eli's tutoring sessions had grown in number and impact. Word had spread about his teaching methods, and more students were coming to him for help, not just with math, but with their own self-confidence and dreams. Many of the students he worked with were in the same place he had once been, feeling like they weren't good enough, like they didn't belong. And Eli knew exactly how to meet them where they were. He helped them see their own potential, helped them believe in themselves when no one else did. But it wasn't just about the students. Eli had changed, too. Through the act of giving back, of mentoring, he had learned to see the world differently. He had learned to see failure not as something to fear, but as a necessary part of growth. He had learned to embrace the discomfort that came with change, knowing that on the other side of it, something better always awaited. As he walked into the community center that morning, he saw Mia sitting at a table, her notebook spread out in front of her. She was working on a problem, her brow furrowed in concentration. Eli smiled. Mia had come so far since their first session together. Where she had once doubted herself at every turn, she now approached math with a sense of curiosity and determination. And it wasn't just math she was excelling in, her newfound confidence was spilling over into other areas of her life as well. She had started playing the violin again, a passion she had abandoned years ago because she thought she wasn't good enough. Now, she was beginning to see the connections between her math skills and her music. Both required patience, practice, and a belief in the power of persistence. "Hey, Mia," Eli greeted her as he sat down across from her. "How's it going?" Mia looked up and smiled, her eyes shining. "I think I finally got it," she said, pointing to a complicated algebraic expression she had been struggling with for weeks. Eli glanced at the page, impressed by her progress. "That's great. I'm proud of you. It's amazing what you can do when you don't give up." Mia grinned. "Thanks, Eli. I didn't think I could do it, but you were right. It just takes practice. And, believing in yourself." The words felt familiar, like echoes of their earlier conversations. It wasn't just about math, it was about believing in her own ability to learn, to grow, and to overcome the obstacles in her path. Eli had taught her that lesson, but more than that, she had taught him. As the day went on, Eli continued working with his students, helping them navigate through the complexities of math and life. He had created a community, a space where students could not only succeed academically but also find support, encouragement, and a sense of belonging. He had become more than just a tutor to them. He was a mentor, a guide, and, in some cases, a friend. Later that afternoon, after his last session of the day, Eli found himself at the park again, where it all started. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow over the lake, and for the first time in a long time, Eli felt at peace. The future was no longer a place of uncertainty. It was a place of possibility. He pulled out his phone and opened the email from Professor Hill once more. Eli had left the opportunity at the National Math Institute behind months ago, but the invitation still lingered in his inbox, a reminder of the choice he had made. It wasn't an easy choice, but it was the right one for him. The path he had chosen wasn't the one that others expected him to take, but it was the one that felt true to his heart. And now, as he looked out over the water, Eli realized that he didn't need to be defined by anyone's expectations, not even his own. The future wasn't about achieving accolades or reaching the top of the math world. It was about living a life that mattered, helping others, growing alongside them, and leaving a lasting impact on the people who needed him most. Eli's phone buzzed in his hand, breaking his reverie. He glanced at the screen and saw a message from Sarah. "Are you free this weekend? I was thinking we could grab coffee and catch up. I've got some big news to share." Eli smiled, knowing that whatever Sarah had to say, it would be a conversation that would further cement the foundation of the friendship that had supported him through this journey. She had always been there for him, encouraging him to follow his heart, to stay true to himself. And now, as he thought about all the people who had supported him along the way, his family, his friends, and his students, Eli knew that he wasn't alone. The future was unfolding before him, and it wasn't a straight line. It was a winding path, full of unexpected twists and turns. But it was his path, and he was ready to walk it, one step at a time. As he stood up to leave, he looked at the lake once more. The ripples in the water mirrored the changes in his life, small, gradual, but powerful in their ability to transform everything they touched. Eli took a deep breath and walked away from the park, ready for whatever came next. Eli had come to understand something that had eluded him for so long: success wasn't measured by the number of contests won or the accolades earned. It was measured by the lives you touched, the people you helped, and the impact you made in the world. And with that understanding, Eli knew he had already won. Not in the way others might define victory, but in a way that was far more meaningful. He had found his purpose, and that was the greatest prize of all. The future, as it unfolded, was his to shape. And Eli was ready to embrace it, with all its uncertainties and possibilities. With that, Eli's story came to a close. The boy who had once been obsessed with winning math contests had grown into a young man who understood that the true measure of success lay not in what you achieved, but in how you helped others find their own paths. His journey wasn't just about math, it was about life, and Eli had finally discovered what it meant to live a life that truly mattered. The soft glow of dawn filtered through Eli's window, waking him gently from a peaceful sleep. It had been over a year since he had made the decision that had reshaped his life. That moment when he chose to leave the world of math contests behind and embark on a journey of mentorship and self-discovery had already become a pivotal point in his story. And yet, in many ways, Eli felt like he was just getting started. The morning air was cool and fresh as Eli made his way downstairs for breakfast. The house was quiet, save for the soft hum of the coffee machine brewing his favorite dark roast. He took a deep breath, enjoying the familiar, comforting scent. Life had a way of bringing things full circle, Eli thought, as he poured himself a cup and took a sip, letting the warmth seep into his soul. He was content. But that didn't mean his journey was over. Lately, Eli had been reflecting more on his future. As much as he had embraced the life of a mentor, he couldn't ignore the part of him that still longed to make a larger impact on the world. Over the past year, he had helped countless students, but there were moments when he missed the thrill of solving complex problems and engaging in intellectual challenges. There was an undeniable spark within him that still yearned to be ignited. For the first time since he made the choice to step away from competitions, Eli was beginning to entertain the possibility that he could still merge the two worlds, the world of academic excellence and the world of mentorship. His love for math hadn't faded, it had evolved. And with that evolution, he began to realize that the two paths, teaching and competing, weren't mutually exclusive. He could do both. The idea started to form one quiet evening when Eli was organizing his notes from his last tutoring session. Mia, his star student, had just finished a particularly challenging calculus problem. They had celebrated her breakthrough together, but deep inside, Eli knew that there was more to his own story. He had taught his students how to persevere, how to find joy in the journey of learning, but now it was time for him to continue his own journey. The question was, where would it lead? A few days later, Eli received an unexpected call from Professor Hill. Eli, the voice on the other end of the line was warm and familiar. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. I've been following your work with the students, and I wanted to tell you how impressed I am with the impact you've made. You've truly built something special. But I also know that you've been hesitant about returning to the world of competitive math, and I wanted to offer you an opportunity that might be exactly what you need. Eli sat back in his chair, his heart racing with anticipation. What kind of opportunity? There's a new initiative at the National Math Institute, Professor Hill continued. We're looking for someone to lead a team of students, talented, driven individuals who need mentorship just as much as they need someone to challenge them. It's not about the competition. It's about creating a new kind of program, one that balances research, mentorship, and personal development. I think you're the perfect person for the job. Eli listened carefully, his mind racing. The idea of returning to the world of math, but in a way that integrated his passion for teaching and helping others, was exactly what he had been searching for. The opportunity was a perfect blend of both paths. It would allow him to dive into the world of mathematical exploration, while also creating an environment where he could continue to guide others. "I'm intrigued," Eli said, his voice filled with excitement. "Tell me more." By the end of the conversation, Eli had made up his mind. He was going to accept the offer. Not because it was the easy choice, or the most prestigious. He wasn't driven by the need to prove himself anymore. Instead, it felt like a natural progression in his own growth. He had found a way to merge his passion for teaching with his love for mathematical challenges. The next few months were a whirlwind. Eli worked closely with Professor Hill to develop the curriculum for the new program. It wasn't just about numbers and formulas, it was about creating an environment where students could truly grow, both intellectually and personally. They worked together to design an experience that encouraged students to collaborate, to solve problems creatively, and to push the boundaries of what they thought was possible. As the program took shape, Eli felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't known in a long time. The students he was working with were incredibly bright, eager to learn, and open to new ways of thinking. They weren't just looking for answers, they were searching for ways to ask the right questions. And Eli was right there with them, guiding them, challenging them, and helping them find their own voices in the world of math. But it wasn't just the students who were growing. Eli, too, was transforming. As he guided others through the challenges of advanced mathematical research, he rediscovered his own love for the subject. He found joy not just in solving problems himself, but in helping others navigate the complexities of the problems they encountered. In the evenings, after a long day of research and mentoring, Eli would often reflect on how far he had come. He thought back to that moment when he had stood at the park, unsure of what to do with his future. He had chosen a path that felt true to who he was, and it had led him here, to a place where he could be both a student and a teacher, a mentor and a scholar. One day, as he was reviewing a student's research project, he received another message from Sarah. It had been months since they had last caught up, and he couldn't help but smile when he saw her name pop up on his phone. "Hey Eli, I was thinking we should grab that coffee we talked about. I've got some exciting news to share, and I think you're going to love it. Let me know when you're free." Eli chuckled to himself. Sarah had always been full of surprises. It had been a long time since they had shared a quiet moment together, reflecting on the journey they had both taken. He decided to take her up on the offer. It had been a while since he had caught up with anyone outside of his work, and he was eager to hear what Sarah had been up to. When they met a few days later, Sarah wasted no time in telling him her news. "You won't believe it, Eli," she said, grinning. "I've been offered a position to lead a mentorship program at the same university where I've been studying. They want me to work with students who are facing the same challenges I faced growing up. I'm so excited, but I couldn't have done it without the example you set. You've shown me what it means to help others in a meaningful way." Eli's heart swelled with pride. "I'm so happy for you, Sarah. You've always had the passion for this work. I knew you were meant to do something like this." As they sat in the cafe, sipping their drinks and laughing, Eli realized that everything had come full circle. He had once been afraid to make the leap into something new, unsure of whether he would ever find his true purpose. But now, sitting here with Sarah, someone who had walked a similar path, Eli understood that sometimes, the journey wasn't linear. It was full of twists and turns, and it required both courage and patience. He had found his purpose, and Sarah had found hers. They were both exactly where they were meant to be. And as they talked about their futures, about the work they would continue to do, Eli felt a deep sense of peace. He had found his place in the world, not as a genius in a math contest, but as someone who could inspire, teach, and help others discover their own greatness. The future was no longer a place of uncertainty. It was a place of endless possibility. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?